Chapter 1823. It was Mufan's first time in the Second Wilderness. Mufan, Mutai, and the entire First Realm had not participated in the battle of the Second Wilderness. Instead, they had been guarding the First Wilderness. Mufan said plainly as he gazed at the Second Wilderness that had turned into a land of death. Upon hearing Mufan's words, Ma Tang's eyes glinted with a fiery passion. The power of all living beings, the power of all living beings. This was definitely what Ma Tang wanted the most. As long as he could obtain the power of all living beings, he would be able to reach the sky in one step. He would be able to form the heavenly immortal mansion and become an expert of the immortal realm. As long as he could form the heavenly immortal mansion, Ma Tang's future would be different. How could he not be excited? Feeling the passion in Ma Tang's eyes, Mufan smiled faintly. All right, what's yours will always be yours. Now let's look for the power of all living beings. Compared to Ma Tang, Mufan was very calm. After all, this was normal because Mufan did not need the power of all living beings at all. Even if it was given to him, Mufan would not use it. Naturally, he could remain calm. Hearing Mufan's words, Ma Tang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart. He respectfully cupped his hands towards Mufan and said, "Yes." Now, they were not sure if there was any power of all living beings in the Second Wilderness. It was just a possibility, so they could not be happy too early. At least, they had to wait until they successfully found the power of all living beings. Moreover, even if they found the power of all living beings, there would be a fierce battle between the heirs. It was hard to say who would win in the end. Mufan arrived at the Second Wilderness and began his search. At the same time, Guanhong, Fu Rui, Quan Feng, Chiu Ru, and Lu Xiao led their people and arrived one after another. They began their search in the Second Wilderness. This time, the 8 barren immortal world was very secretive. They didn't send any strong cultivators, so the 8 barren immortal world didn't know about this. This gave the heirs enough time to search for the power of all living beings in the second barren immortal world. However, it was not easy to find the power of all living beings in the Second Wilderness. This was because the Second Wilderness was very large. Even though it had completely become a land of death, its area had not decreased at all. Under Xin Yuanling's guidance, Xiao Chun and the others took half a day to arrive at the place where Xin Yuanling and Long Qing had encountered the power of living beings. However, as the force of living beings was completely refined by the two of them, nothing was left here. Not even the slightest presence of the force of living beings could be sensed. After searching around for a while, they didn't find anything valuable. Several days later, Xiao Chun and the others returned to the starship one after another. Yi Xiao said helplessly, "Seems like there's no living beings force here. We've already searched everywhere." He was certain that there was no living beings force here. Hearing this, Xiao Chun nodded slightly and said, "Let's go and take a look elsewhere." Since they didn't find any valuable clues here, there was naturally no need to waste any more time. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the Chinese people nodded in agreement. Then, the starship set off again and hurried to other places in the Second Wilderness. Because all the continents in the Second Wilderness had been destroyed, there was nothing in the entire Second Wilderness apart from the endless starry sky and gravel. Therefore, after searching for nearly half a month in the Second Wilderness, Xiao Chun and the others were somewhat confused. In addition, there was no spiritual qi in the Second Wilderness at all, so they were extremely unaccustomed to the environment here. Cultivators were extremely sensitive to the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Without spiritual qi in the world, cultivators would instinctively feel uncomfortable. Therefore, after half a month, Yi Xiao couldn't help but complain, "This is really a barren place. There's not even a trace of spiritual qi of heaven and earth." He didn't like the Second Wilderness very much, but it made sense. He believed that no cultivator in the world would like such a place without any spiritual qi. However, they had no choice. They hadn't found the power of living beings yet, so they obviously couldn't leave now. "All right," Xiao Chen said calmly. "Even the origin of heaven and earth in the Second Wilderness has been taken away. It's normal that there's no spiritual qi here. Let's speed up and find the power of living beings. Finding the power of living beings was the most important thing. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yi Xiao pursed his lips helplessly but didn't say anything. After all, if they found the power of living beings this time, the final beneficiary would probably be Hongxiu. Xiao Chen was also searching for the power of living beings for Hongxiu. In this way, Yi Xiao naturally had nothing to complain about. Everyone searched for the power of living beings along the way. On the other side, Mu Fan and the other heirs also led people to search all over the second wilderness. Unfortunately, it had been almost a month since the heirs entered the second wilderness, but they still hadn't found any trace of the power of living beings. Almost a month had passed, but there were still no clues. For a moment, the heirs started to doubt whether the power of living beings existed in the second wilderness. Doubts arose in their minds, but the search of the second wilderness had not been completed yet, and they were not willing to leave just like that. After thinking about it, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao finally discussed and decided that it was not a good idea to continue searching like this. Sitting in a circle in the starship, Xiao Chun looked at the people below and said, "We can't continue searching like this. I think that before we find the power of living beings, we should join forces." When Xiao Chun said join forces, he meant that they would work together with Guan Hong and the others, including Mu Fan. Everyone would attack each other for information and search in a planned manner. This way, they would be much more efficient. After all, the heirs were fighting for themselves now. Sometimes they would search the places that they'd searched before. This was undoubtedly a waste of time and effort. But once they joined forces, they could search in a planned manner. They could completely avoid the situation of searching the same area repeatedly. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone felt that it made sense. However, Yi Xiao also voiced his worries. That's good, but what if someone finds the strength of all living beings and takes it for themselves? Joining forces for the time being was indeed not a problem, and it was also the best solution. However, just as Yi Xiao was worried, if someone found the strength of living beings but kept it a secret and directly took it for himself, what would they do? This problem had to be taken into consideration. They didn't want to waste so much effort for nothing. In the end, it would actually benefit someone else. That wouldn't be worth the loss. Hearing Yi Xiao's words, everyone nodded in agreement. Indeed, they had to be on guard. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 1824. In the face of Yi Xiao's concerns, Xiao Chen nodded in agreement. Then he smiled confidently and said, "That's not a problem. When the time comes, we'll put a sensing talisman on each of us. That way, if someone finds the power of living beings, everyone will know at once." The sensing talisman was an immortal level talisman. However, it was of the lowest level. Furthermore, it was of little use on normal days. However, at this time, it was very useful. The sensing talisman only had two functions. First, it could sense all kinds of auras. As long as one carried the sensing talisman on them, even if they were thousands of miles away, others would be able to sense the aura of the person carrying the sensing talisman. Second, it had a positioning function. Even if the sensing talisman was destroyed, one's position could still be tracked. These two functions seemed very simple, and in fact they were. The most important reason why the sensing talisman could become an immortal level talisman diamond was because of the distance. The sensing talisman would be effective no matter where one was within a certain distance. Hearing Xiao Chun mention the sensing talisman, Longqing and Xianyuan Ling were a little confused. After all, the two of them had just joined the Hachiburas Senkai. They were very unfamiliar with immortal level talismans and immortal skills. Longqing and Xianyuan Ling had never come into contact with them before, so it was not strange. On the other hand, Yi Xiao said excitedly, "That's a good idea. Brother Xiao Chun, it seems like you're smart. Why didn't I think of that? In this way, we won't have to worry about people secretly keeping it. As long as someone senses the aura of the power of living beings, we'll know before he finds it. Then, we can rush over directly without worrying about people secretly keeping it." Yi Xiao said excitedly. Seeing this, Xiao Chen glanced at him helplessly. He really didn't know what this guy was so excited about. Did he have to be so excited? Ignoring Yi Xiao, Xiao Chun sent a message to the other heirs of Kunlun after seeing that no one had any objections. Then, they discussed a place to gather. This was the first time they had gathered together since entering the Second Desolation. Several days later, in the Second Barren Territory, Xiao Chun and the other heirs of Kunlun gathered in 7 spaceships. On the spaceship of the 7th Realm, Xiao Chun, Yi Xiao, Guan Hong, Mu Fan, Fu Rui, Quan Feng, Qiu Ru, and Lu Xiao sat together. Xiao Chun shared his thoughts with them. After hearing Xiao Chun's plan, everyone felt that it was feasible. In this way, the efficiency would indeed increase by a lot, and they wouldn't have to worry about someone stealing the power of living beings. The few of them expressed their agreement, and even Mu Fan did not object. After all, this was beneficial to everyone, and there was no reason to object. Everyone nodded in agreement. In the end, Xiao Chun said, "Since that's the case, then it's decided. However, there are some things that I think I should say first. Since we all have the sensory talisman on us, then if anyone destroys the sensory talisman, we'll treat it as finding the power of living beings. When the time comes, we'll rush over together. Do you have any objections?" "Of course," Qiu said emotionlessly. If they destroyed the sensory talisman, then they obviously had a clue about the power of living beings. In this way, it wouldn't be a problem for them to rush over directly. Seeing that everyone nodded, Xiao Chun continued. "In addition, until now, we still can't be sure whether the power of living beings exists in the Second Barren Territory. Therefore, I think that the most important thing now is to find the power of living beings as soon as possible. At least we have to confirm whether the power of living beings exists in the Second Barren Territory as soon as possible. If there isn't, we don't have to waste time here. As for how to distribute the power of living beings after we find it, that's the next step. Therefore, I hope that since we're cooperating now, we can put other things aside first and talk about it after we find the power of living beings." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone nodded. Indeed, they hadn't even seen the shadow of the power of living beings. It was too early to say anything. The most important thing was to confirm whether the power of living beings existed in the Second Barren Territory as soon as possible. If there wasn't, then there was no need for them to waste time here. After reaching a consensus, everyone divided the Second Barren Territory into 7 areas. Everyone was responsible for searching in one area. In this way, there was almost no interference and they could speed up the process. Because Yi Xiao and Xiao Chun were on the same starship, they naturally went with Xiao Chun. After dividing the areas, the heirs didn't stop. After exchanging sensory talismans, they dispersed and started searching according to the areas they divided. With a plan, their speed was naturally much faster than before. Another half a month passed. More than 80% of the Second Barren Territory had been searched by everyone. However, they still hadn't found the power of living beings. With the sensory talisman, Xiao Chun wasn't worried that the other heirs would discover that they'd embezzled the power of living beings. This was because Xiao Chun was sure that no one had discovered the power of living beings through the sensory talisman. At the same time, no one had taken the initiative to destroy the sensory talisman. Everything was normal. However, as the search continued, everyone felt more and more that they'd probably rejoice for nothing this time. After a day of searching, Xiao Chun, Yi Xiao, Hong Xiu, Long Qing, Xin Yuan Ling, and the others sat together. They drank and chatted. "We've searched for so long. I'm 80% sure that there's no power of living beings in the Second Barren Territory," Yi Xiao said dejectedly after taking a sip of wine. Their hope was getting slimmer and slimmer. Hearing this, Xiao Chun didn't reply. He just continued drinking. Indeed, they'd searched more than 80% of the territory, but they still hadn't found the power of living beings. There wasn't much hope. Glancing at Hong Xiu, Xiao Chun saw that she didn't change her expression at all. He was relieved. Actually, Hong Xiu was a silly girl. She didn't care too much about the power of living beings. She just wanted to stay by Xiao Chen's side. As for the power of living beings, in Hong Xiu's opinion, it was her fortune to obtain it. If she didn't, it was her fate. There was no need to worry about it. They were a little disappointed. However, as soon as Yi Xiao finished speaking, Xiao Qian's and Yi Xiao's expressions changed. Then their eyes flashed. Yi Xiao spoke first. Lu Xiao destroyed the sensing talisman. Just now, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao sensed at the same time that Lu Xiao had destroyed the sensing talisman. Furthermore, the moment he destroyed the sensing talisman, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao sensed that Lu Xiao had found the power of living beings through the sensing talisman. And the power of living beings? Their eyes met. Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao quickly regained their senses. Yi Xiao immediately said, Mother asterisk her. He actually found it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1825. There really was the power of all living beings. Lu Xiao had destroyed the sensory talisman on his own accord. The aura that came from the moment the sensory talisman was destroyed made Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao certain that this guy had definitely felt the aura of the power of all living beings. However, he couldn't hide the existence of the power of all living beings from destroying the sensory talisman. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the other heirs felt it too. The sensory talisman also clearly told Xiao Chun and the other heirs where Lu Xiao was now. This was the effect of the sensory talisman. It was impossible to hide the power of all living beings from anyone who discovered it. Without wasting any time, Xiao Chun immediately gave the order to rush towards Lu Xiao at full speed. The starship speed was increased to the maximum, traveling quickly through the second wilderness. Not only Xiao Chun and the others, but Mu Fan, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, Quan Feng, and Xiu Ru were also rushing towards Lu Xiao. At this moment, Lu Xiao and the 5 young talents from the 6th world stood beside him. The 5 young talents from the 6th world all looked excited. The power of all living beings. There was indeed the power of all living beings in the second wilderness. How could they not be excited? Sensing the 5 people's excitement, Lu Xiao's expression remained calm. He said indifferently, Don't be happy too early. Since we've found the power of living, the others must have sensed it as well. Now is the real beginning. Lu Xiao knew that he'd felt the aura of the power of all living beings. This way, the other heirs must have felt it through the sensory talisman. To be honest, he'd just be deceiving himself by destroying the sensory talisman. It was meaningless. At this moment, Xiao Chun and the others were probably already on their way. Lu Xiao was right. Xiao Chun and the others were indeed on their way. It was hard to say who would get the power of all living beings in the end. Upon hearing Lu Xiao's words, the 5 prodigies from the 6th world behind him were slightly stunned. Then, the excitement in their eyes quickly disappeared. Yes, finding the strength of all living things did not mean that one could obtain it. This time, all 8 heirs of Hachiber Sankai had come, and there was only one strength of all living things. Everyone wanted to obtain it, but it was hard to say what the final result would be. Lu Xiao believed that there would definitely be a fierce battle. This was definitely not wrong. However, Lu Xiao was already prepared for this, and he believed that the others were the same. Taking a deep breath, Lu Xiao said indifferently, Let's go. Let's find the force of living beings first. Lu Xiao had only sensed the aura of the force of living beings and had a general direction, but he had not truly found the location of the force of living beings. Otherwise, before Xiao Chun and the others arrived, Lu Xiao would have already sent people in and occupied it first. Searching for the aura of the force of living beings, Lu Xiao and the others began to move. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the others arrived at the place where Lu Xiao had been previously. Here, they also sensed the aura of the force of living beings. Exchanging a look with Yi Xiao, Xiao Chun said softly, Lu Xiao has probably already started to move. I'm afraid we have to speed up. Compared to Lu Xiao, Xiao Chun and the others were definitely one step behind, so they had to hurry. Otherwise, if Lu Xiao took the lead and occupied the force of living beings, there would be no other way. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Yi Xiao also nodded. Then, Xiao Chun and the others also walked in the direction of the aura of the force of living beings. Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao were the first to arrive because they were the closest to each other. Then Mu Fan, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, Quan Feng, and Xiu Ru also arrived one after another. They immediately began to search for the aura of the force of living beings. Everyone was racing against time. Even Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao directly flew out of the starship, intending to reach the force of living beings first and stop Lu Xiao. No matter what, they couldn't let Lu Xiao directly occupy the force of living beings. Otherwise, it would be useless even if they arrived. Compared to the others, Lu Xiao definitely had a certain advantage. After searching all the way, Lu Xiao and the others finally found the entrance to the force of living beings. A light gate was quietly suspended in the dead silent starry sky of the second wilderness. However, when Lu Xiao saw this light gate, a strange look flashed across his eyes. The 5 sixth realm geniuses behind him were stunned. This was the force of living beings. It was a treasure that could allow them to reach the sky in one step. As long as they could obtain this force of living beings, some of them could directly condense the celestial immortal mansion and enter the ranks of the immortal realm. The 5 of them were still in shock, but Lu Xiao had already come to his senses. He immediately whispered, "Zhang Yang, hurry up and go in." Zhang Yang was the second most powerful person among the younger generation of the 6th realm. Now that he had found the force of living beings, he naturally had to give it to him. At this time, the other heirs had not arrived yet. Lu Xiao immediately asked Zhang Yang to enter. As long as Zhang Yang entered the force of living beings, the light gate would close. In this way, even if Xiao Chun and the others arrived, it would be useless. Hearing Lu Xiao's words, Zhang Yang also came to his senses. Then, without any hesitation, Zhang Yang moved his feet and immediately flew toward the light gate. Seeing Zhang Yang rushing toward the light gate, Lu Xiao secretly became nervous. He kept muttering to himself, "You must catch up. You must catch up." As long as Zhang Yang could successfully enter the light gate, the force of living beings would definitely belong to the 6th realm. Then, no one would be able to do anything about it. Unfortunately, Lu Xiao could not stop praying in his heart. Just when Zhang Yan was less than 200 meters away from the door of light, a black light flashed across and blocked Zhang Yang's path. Zhang Yang was less than 200 meters away from the black light. However, Zhang Yang had no choice but to stop. The black light was giving Zhang Yang a sense of danger. At the same time, Lu Xiao, who was standing on the starship, saw the black light appear and a trace of helplessness flashed in his eyes. Still a little bit more. Lu Xiao did not need to look to know who had come. As Lu Xiao whispered softly, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao appeared in front of Zhang Yang, completely blocking his path. Yi Xiao glanced at Zhang Yang indifferently and smiled. Then he looked at Lu Xiao on the starship and said, "Lu Xiao, what is the meaning of this? Didn't you say that you can't take the force of living beings for yourself?" Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao were relieved that they had made it in time. Yi Xiao looked at Lu Xiao with a playful expression and asked, "Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1826. They had finally made it. If they had been just a little bit later, Zhang Yang would have rushed into the light door. By then, even if Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao arrived, they could only watch helplessly. He looked at Lu Xiao with a mocking expression. Actually, they had agreed that whoever discovered the power of living beings could not take it for themselves. However, such a promise was actually very fragile and not worth believing at all. With the power of living beings before them, who would care about such bullsh*t promises? Therefore, from the beginning, none of the heirs would believe such a promise. This time, Lu Xiao had found the power of living beings first, so he wanted to take it for himself. This was normal. If Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao had found the power of living beings first, they would probably have done the same. In front of such a precious treasure, all bullsh*t promises were meaningless. Even if the heirs all belonged to the Hachibara Senkai, so what? Who would not want their own people to obtain the power of living beings? Therefore, after hearing Yi Xiao's words, Lu Xiao quickly came back to his senses. He chuckled softly and said, "Let's wait for the others to arrive first." There was no chance to fight for the power of living beings alone. Therefore, they could only wait for all the heirs to arrive first before deciding who would take it. Hearing Lu Zhao's words, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao did not refuse. Originally, the two of them could have sent Hong Xiu indirectly. After all, Lu Xiao was only one person. Unfortunately, because of the haste earlier, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao had arrived first. Hong Xiu and the others were still behind them in a starship. They were a little depressed, but there was nothing they could do. If Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao had not arrived first, Zhang Yang would probably have entered the light door by now. If that happened, it would really be over. They could only wait for all the heirs to arrive first. However, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao had already expected such a situation. Time passed slowly. Soon, Hong Xiu and the others arrived on their starship. With her arrival, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao's thoughts became active. Now, the other heirs had not arrived yet. Only Lu Xiao and the 5 geniuses from the 6th world were present. If Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao made a move now, there was a high chance that they would send Hong Xiu in. They looked at each other. Without saying anything, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao already made a decision. Xiao Chun stepped forward and said to Lu Xiao, "Brother Lu Xiao, I'm sorry." With that, Xiao Chun made a move directly. Yi Xiao followed closely behind. Facing Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao's sudden attack, Lu Xiao was actually not too surprised. He had already guessed that this would be the result. Now that the other heirs had not arrived yet, it was a great opportunity for Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao. Without changing his expression, Lu Xiao made a move and said calmly, "Brother Xiao Chun, are you in such a hurry? I have no choice. There's only one strength of all living things. I don't want to miss it," Xiao Chun replied calmly, pointing a finger. Without waiting for Lu Xiao's reply, Xiao Chun said directly to Hong Xiu, who was on the starship behind him, "Hurry up and go in. What are you waiting for?" The purpose of Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao's attack was not to kill Lu Xiao and the 5 geniuses from the 6th realm. They just wanted to delay them so that Hong Xiu could enter the light door and obtain the strength of all living things. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Hong Xiu did not hesitate and immediately ran towards the light door. Just as she was about to enter the light door, suddenly, another starship flew over quickly. At the same time, a cold voice was heard. "Good sister, do you want the strength of all living things? I'm afraid it's not your turn yet." Along with the voice, a purple light flashed past. At the critical moment, Mu Fan led the 5 geniuses from the 1st realm and arrived. They did not expect the person to be Mu Fan. However, because of Mu Fan's appearance, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao's plan was completely ruined. After stopping Hong Xiu with one blow, Mu Fan's starship slowly came to Lu Xiao and the others. Standing on the starship, Mu Fan looked at Lu Xiao coldly. "Brother Lu, how about we join forces?" If it was Mu Fan, then he would definitely not be on Xiao Chen's side. If it was Fu Rui, then Hong Xiu would have already entered the light door. Hearing Mu Fan's words, Lu Xiao did not hesitate at all. He immediately nodded happily and said sure. Lu Xiao naturally would not refuse to join forces with Mu Fan. After all, the 4 heirs of Ye's field had arrived. Needless to say, Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao were obviously in the same boat. As for Lu Xiao, if he did not join forces with Mu Fan, he would definitely not be a match for Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao. As long as Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao were not allowed to obtain the strength of all living things, it was not a big deal to join forces with Mu Fan temporarily. Hearing Lu Xiao nod in agreement, Mu Fan smiled coldly. Then he turned to Xiao Chun and said, "Xiao Chun, you are not fated to obtain the strength of all living things. With me around, you will definitely not be able to obtain it." Mu Fan's hatred for Xiao Chun was needless to say. Hearing his words, Xiao Chun waved his hand indifferently. Right now, it was still unknown who would obtain the strength of all living things. It was a pity just now, but there was no other way. Just like Zhang Yang, it was Mu Fan's fault for arriving in time. The 4 of them gathered together and restrained each other. Otherwise, they would not be able to approach the light door of the strength of all living things. Under such circumstances, time passed slowly. Chapter 1827. They didn't know that the three of them had joined forces. This was Xiao Chen's advantage. Of course, now that the 8 heirs were all here, it wouldn't be so easy to get the power of living beings. Moreover, Mu Fan had been looking at Xiao Chen coldly. Obviously, he wanted to keep a close eye on Xiao Chen. The 8 heirs didn't act rashly. They were wary of each other. They had to be careful when facing the power of living beings. Quan Feng glanced at everyone one by one. In the end, he was the first to speak. Everyone, there's only one power of living beings, and there are 8 of us. How should we divide it? How to divide the power of living beings became the most important question now. Hearing this, the other heirs fell silent. Facing the power of living beings, no one wanted to give it up. Although the power of living beings was useless to the heirs, it was a priceless treasure to the young geniuses below them. If anyone could get the power of living beings, it would greatly improve the strength of their own realm. Hearing Quan Feng's words, Mu Fan sneered and said, I think Xiao Chen should give it up. The 7th realm now has 3 heirs who have condensed heavenly immortal mansions. I think the 7th realm is no longer qualified to fight for the power of living beings. Mu Fan was the first to speak, and the first thing he did was to target Xiao Chen. Hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. Guan Hong and the other heirs agreed with Mu Fan. It wasn't that they had any opinions about Xiao Chen, but that Mu Fan was telling the truth. Although it was undeniable that Mu Fan's words were targeted at Xiao Chen, everything that Mu Fan said was true. After Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing joined the 7th realm, it was like the 7th realm had 3 heirs with heavenly immortal mansions. Even though Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing were not strong enough to compete with the other heirs, the 2 with heavenly immortal mansions did have the possibility of catching up with the other heirs. In this way, if the 7th realm obtained the power of all living things, wouldn't the 7th realm have 4 heirs with heavenly immortal mansions? Obviously, the other heirs didn't want to see this result. After all, no one wanted to be under someone else. After Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing joined the 7th realm, the strength of the younger generation had surpassed the other realms. Therefore, no one wanted the 7th realm to obtain the power of living beings. Guan Hong and the rest agreed with Mu Fan's words. Regarding this, Xiao Chen's reaction was out of everyone's expectations. After Mu Fan finished speaking, Xiao Chen spoke without hesitation. Don't worry, the 7th realm doesn't want the power of living beings. He directly said that the 7th realm didn't want the power of living beings. Hearing this, Guan Hong and the others' expressions softened a little. However, Mu Fan sneered at this time. Xiao Chen, are you willing to give up the power of living beings? Do you think we are 3-year-old children? Mu Fan was deliberately targeting Xiao Chen, but Xiao Chen didn't show any signs of anger. He smiled and said, the 7th realm came this time only to help the 8th wilderness obtain more power of living beings. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the power of living beings. Besides, Yu Shujin didn't come this time. I think this should be enough to explain everything. Yu Shujin didn't come. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Guan Hong and the others basically believed Xiao Chen. After all, if the 7th realm really wanted the power of living beings, they would definitely bring Yu Shujin along. But now, Yu Shujin didn't come at all. In this case, Xiao Chen's words were somewhat credible. Xiao Chen voluntarily said that he would give up, but the 7th realm would help the 8th realm fight for the power of living beings. In fact, it wasn't a big deal to tell them this. After all, everyone knew about the relationship between Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao. They also knew that the 2 realms must have joined forces. It didn't make any difference whether they said it or not. They didn't want to dwell on the 7th realm's matter anymore. In this case, how can we determine the ownership of the power of living beings? There was only one power of living beings, and all the heirs wanted it. Therefore, it was inevitable that one party would fight for it. Hearing Guan Hong's words, no one answered. As for Xiao Chen, there was a flash of light in his eyes. He quietly transmitted a message to Hong Xiu, who was beside him. Hong Xiu, when we fight later, you don't have to worry about anything. Just find a chance to rush into the power of living beings. I will block the others for you. A chaotic battle was inevitable, and Xiao Chun had also asked Hong Xiu to be prepared. Hearing Xiao Chun's message, Hong Xiu nodded slightly. Seeing this, the corners of Xiao Chun's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. Then, without any warning, Xiao Chun directly pointed his finger at Mu Fan, directly displaying the Xianyuan finger sword. Do it, Xiao Chun shouted coldly. Then, Yi Xiao and the geniuses from the 7th and 8th realms attacked together. Xiao Chun suddenly attacked, and Mu Fan reacted immediately. As he blocked Xiao Chun's attack, he shouted coldly, Xiao Chun, I knew you were despicable. Mu Fan had always been on guard against Xiao Chun. He knew that Xiao Chun was not someone who could be underestimated. Xiao Chun was just like him, capable of using any means to deal with him. As a matter of fact, Xiao Chun chose to make his move without waiting for anyone to discuss it. The scene was thrown into complete chaos as soon as Xiao Chun made his move. Needless to say, Mu Fan was engaged in a fierce battle with Xiao Chun. At this time, Yi Xiao was also protecting Hong Xiu as they rushed toward the light gate of the force of living beings. At the same time, seeing this, Lu Xiao did not stay idle. He immediately led his men to stop Yi Xiao and several young geniuses from the 8th realm. Yi Xiao could not escape from Lu Xiao's attack. However, at this time, Yi Xiao also shouted, Hong Xiu, go quickly. Xiao Chun and Mu Fan were fighting fiercely, while Yi Xiao and Lu Xiao were fighting fiercely. Hearing Yi Xiao's words, Hong Xiu did not hesitate and directly rushed toward the light gate. However, at this time, Guanhong also attacked. Although Guanhong had no hostility towards Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao, the power of living beings was in front of him. He would never let Hong Xiu get it so easily. After all, Guanhong also wanted such a treasure. Hong Xiu, you can't go through. Guanhong directly blocked Hong Xiu's path and said flatly. Indeed, with him, an air, blocking Hong Xiu's path, it was impossible for her to break through. Guanhong did not mean to hurt Hong Xiu. He just wanted to stop her from getting the power of living beings. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1828. Guanhong led his men to stop Hong Xiu. His face was calm. Now that Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao were entangled with Mu Fan and Lu Xiao, there was no one else to help Hong Xiu. With Hong Xiu's strength, it was almost impossible for her to break through Guanhong's blockade. He had absolute confidence that he could subdue Hong Xiu in an instant. However, just as Guanhong finished speaking, before Hong Xiu could reply, Fu Rui unexpectedly came to Hong Xiu's side and looked at Guanhong with a smile. Guanhong, I haven't sparred with you for a long time. I wonder if you have made any progress during this time. Fu Rui suddenly led his men forward. Guanhong's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly regained his senses. At the same time, Fu Rui had already made his move. The two of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Fu Rui stopped Guanhong. In the midst of the fierce battle, Fu Rui said to Hong Xiu, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Fu Rui was also there to help Hong Xiu obtain the power of living beings. As Fu Rui made his move, Mu Fan, who was engaged in a fierce battle with Xiao Chun, shouted with a gloomy face. Xiao Chun, Yi Xiao, Fu Rui, the three of them have already joined forces. Quan Feng, quickly stop Hong Xiu. Xiao Chun and the other two made their moves one after another. From the beginning to the end, they had been clearing the way for Hong Xiu. At this time, if they still couldn't tell that the three of them had secretly joined forces, then Guanhong and the others should really buy a piece of tofu and commit suicide. Mu Fan, Lu Xiao, and Guanhong were all stopped by Xiao Chun and the other two. Seeing that Hong Xiu was heading straight for the light gate, Mu Fan couldn't help but shout at Quan Feng. Hearing Mu Fan's words, Quan Feng didn't hesitate. He moved his feet and went straight for Hong Xiu. With Quan Feng's help, Mu Fan was secretly relieved. To be honest, even if Mu Fan couldn't obtain the power of living beings, he definitely didn't want to see Hongxiu obtain it. Unfortunately, before Mu Fan could completely relax, Xiao Chun said to Long Qing and Xian Yuanling, who were engaged in a fierce battle with two geniuses from the first realm. Big brother, second sister, stop Quan Feng. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling weren't the heir's opponents yet, but they could stop Quan Feng and delay him for a while. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling did not hesitate. They immediately abandoned the two geniuses in front of them and went straight for Quan. Quan Feng originally wanted to stop Hongxiu, but halfway there, he was blocked by Long Qing and Xian Yuanling. Quan Feng was not familiar with Xian Yuanling and Long Qing, but he knew that both of them had condensed the heavenly immortal mansion. Although they had just broken through to the immortal realm, their combined strength was not to be underestimated. Looking at the two of them, Quan Feng's expression darkened slightly. I remember that you guys are called Long Qing and Xian Yuanling, Xiao Chen's elder brother and second sister. Hearing Quan Feng's words, Xian Yuanling and Xian Yuanling did not comment. Long Qing replied faintly, Senior brother Quan Feng, I hope you can make it easy for Hongxiu this time. My little brother will definitely thank you greatly in the future, Long Qing said. If Quan Feng was willing to stop, it would naturally be best. Unfortunately, after hearing Long Qing's words, Quan Feng replied without hesitation, I also want the power of all beings. It was almost impossible for Quan Feng to give up the power of all beings. Hearing this, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling knew that it was impossible to be kind, so they could only attack. Immediately, the two of them attacked Quan Feng without any hesitation. Seeing this, Quan Feng also attacked without any hesitation. Quan Feng also attacked, but he was still stopped by Long Qing and Xian Yuanling. To be honest, even though Xian Yuanling and Long Qing were suppressed by Quan Feng, it was not so easy for Quan Feng to take them down in a short period of time. Moreover, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling knew very well that their goal was not to defeat Quan Feng, but to delay him. Therefore, during the battle with Quan Feng, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling did not fight Quan Feng head-on at all. On the contrary, they kept dodging. As long as they did not give Quan Feng a chance to attack Hongxiu, their mission would be considered completed. For a moment, although they had the upper hand, they were still unable to defeat Long Qing, and Xian Yuanling. Quan Feng's face grew darker and darker. Seeing that Hongxiu was getting closer and closer to the light door, Quan Feng sighed helplessly in his heart. He could not help but exclaim, It seems that the power of all beings will belong to Hongxiu. It was obvious that Xiao Chun, Yi Xiao, and Quan Feng were well prepared for their secret alliance. They had caught everyone off guard. Of course, at this moment, Guan Hong and the others did not know that the alliance of Xiao Chun, Yi Xiao, and Quan Feng was actually planned by Hong Lian. Seeing that Hongxiu was about to enter the light door, Mu Fan could not help but shout, Qiu Ru, what are you waiting for? At this moment, all the heirs of Kunlun were fighting together. Only Qiu Ru had not attacked. In fact, Qiu Ru and Hongxiu had a good relationship, which was why Qiu Ru had not attacked yet. Hearing Mu Fan's angry shout, Qiu Ru still had no intention of attacking. Seeing this, Mu Fan could not help but shout, Qiu Ru, stop her. The first realm will give up the power of all beings. What do you think? Qiu Ru was unwilling to attack, and Mu Fan was entangled with Xiao Chun. He could not free himself to deal with Hongxiu. As a result, Mu Fan was willing to give up the power of all beings. In Mu Fan's heart, it was fine if the first realm could not get the power of all beings, but they could not let Hongxiu get it, let alone Xiao Chun and the others. Anyone could get the power of all beings except Hongxiu. Therefore, Mu Fan was willing to give it up in exchange for Qiu Ru's help. The hatred in Mu Fan's heart made him unable to care about anything else. However, after hearing his words, Ma Tang, who was fighting fiercely from the seventh realm, showed a look of disappointment. Mu Fan had taken the initiative to give up the power of all beings, which meant that Ma Tang would not be able to get it. The power of all beings was useless to Mu Fan, but to Ma Tang, It was a treasure full of temptation. Now, Mu Fan had given it up, so one could imagine how Ma Tang felt. Because of the disappointment in his heart, Ma Tang did not have much fighting spirit. He had completely suppressed the Seventh Realm's genius, but now Ma Tang had taken the initiative to weaken his attack. Thinking about it, if he was destined to not get the power of all beings, why would he fight so hard? Mu Fan did not notice the change in Ma Tang at all. Seeing that Xiao Ru still did not respond, Mu Fan could not help but continue. How about it, Xiao Ru? As long as you stop Hong Xiao, the First Realm is willing to give up the power of all beings. Then, the four of you can divide the power of all beings as you wish. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1829. In order to prevent Hong Xiao from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan could be said to have given up everything. He didn't even care about Ma Tang's feelings and gave up the strength of living beings. As long as Hong Xiao obtained it, Mu Fan could accept anyone else. After hearing Mu Fan shout, Xiao Ru, who had been indifferent, finally made her move. She moved her feet and flew towards Hong Xiao. Seeing that Xiao Ru finally made her move, Mu Fan sneered. Xiao Chun, I will never let you have your way. As long as he could stop Hong Xiao from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan could accept it. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun frowned slightly. Xiao Ru's attack had indeed left Xiao Chun with no other choice because there was no one on his side who could stop Xiao Ru. Even Longqing and Xianyuan Ling had made their moves. Xiao Chun indeed had no one to rely on, and he couldn't free himself. Who would have thought that in order to prevent Hong Xiao from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan would be willing to give it up? This was indeed a desperate gamble. For example, although Guan Hong and Quan Fong had made their moves, they could only stop Hong Xiao from obtaining the strength of living beings. If there was really no other way, they could only watch helplessly as Hong Xiao obtained the strength of living beings. They definitely wouldn't be like Mu Fan, who would rather give up than let Hong Xiao have her way. Mu Fan's decision was obviously inseparable from his hatred for Xiao Chun. Ignoring Mu Fan's words, Xiao Chun didn't stop attacking. However, it was certain that he wouldn't be able to deal with Mu Fan in a short period of time. In the blink of an eye, when Hong Xiao was less than 10 meters away from the strength of living beings, she was stopped by Xiao Ru. With less than 10 meters, Hong Xiao could successfully enter the strength of living beings, and no one would be able to stop her. However, it was this distance of less than 10 meters that was completely cut off with Xiao Ru's appearance. The slightest difference could lead to a great loss. Looking at Xiao Ru, Hong Xiao's eyes flashed with a strange glint, and she said with a complicated expression, Sister Xiao Ru, Hong Xiao and Xiao Ru were on good terms. So Hong Xiao had mixed feelings when Xiao Ru tried to stop her. Upon hearing Hong Xiao's words, Xiao Ru's expression changed slightly, and she let out a helpless sigh. Xiao Ru attached great importance to the power of all beings. After all, the Fifth Realm needed the power of all beings very much. However, Xiao Ru knew that the power of all beings was extremely important to Hong Xiao. Ever since she was young, Mu Fan had always targeted Hong Xiao. As a result, other than Yi Xiao, Hong Xiao did not have any good friends. It wasn't that there was a problem with Hong Xiao herself. It was just that Hong Xiao didn't dare to make friends with others. Once someone got close to Hong Xiao, Mu Fan would make a move. Xiao Ru had always been disgusted with Mu Fan's way of doing things. In Xiao Ru's eyes, Mu Fan was a little abnormal. Hong Xiao was like a plaything in Mu Fan's eyes, and she could only be Mu Fan's plaything. It wasn't easy for Hong Xiao to meet Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun treated Hong Xiao well and wasn't afraid of Mu Fan at all. Due to Xiao Chun's presence, Hong Xiao gradually got rid of her fear of Mu Fan. Looking at Hong Xiao, Xiao Ru pondered for a few moments and said indifferently, Go ahead. Xiao Ru stepped aside and made way for Hong Xiao. It was apparent that she had given up the power of all beings to Hong Xiao. Yi Xiao, who was secretly delighted, inadvertently saw that Xiao Ru had made way for Hong Xiao. Upon seeing this, Mu Fan flew into a rage. Xiao, what are you doing? Originally, Mu Fan wanted Xiao to stop Hong Xiao. But now, even though they had caught up, Xiao took the initiative to make way for Hong Xiao. This made Mu Fan's anger soar to the sky. Upon hearing Mu Fan's angry roar, Xiao coldly glanced at him and said, "Do I need to report to you what I do?" Xiao didn't like Mu Fan at all. At this moment, because of his anger, Mu Fan actually used a commanding tone to speak to her. It made Xiao feel like she was his subordinate. As a result, Xiao, who had a cold personality, naturally wouldn't be nice to Mu Fan. Upon hearing Xiao's words, Mu Fan was furious. At the same time, Hong Xiao looked at Xiao's actions and was slightly stunned. Sister Xiao, Hong Xiao didn't expect Xiao to make way for Hong Xiao. Her eyes revealed a touch of emotion. Upon hearing Hong Xiao's words, a rare, gentle smile appeared on Xiao's face. She gently stroked Hong Xiao's hair and said, "Silly girl, hurry up and go. This is a rare opportunity. If you miss it, perhaps you won't encounter such an opportunity again in your life." Xiao's words weren't false. The strength of living beings was something that could only be encountered and not sought. If Hong Xiao missed this opportunity, perhaps she wouldn't have such an opportunity again in her life. When that time came, Hong Xiao would probably have to settle for the second best and condense the earth a mortal's abode. Upon hearing Xiao's words, Hong Xiao's eyes reddened. She didn't know what to say, but she immediately threw herself into Xiao's arms and said in a choked voice, "Sister Xiao." Xiao had always been good to Hong Xiao. In the past, other than Yi Xiao, Xiao was the only one who would stand up for Hong Xiao. However, Xiao wasn't always by Hong Xiao's side, so she couldn't help Hong Xiao much. Looking at Hong Xiao's tear-stained face, Xiao smiled helplessly and said, all right, silly girl. Now isn't the time to cry. Hurry up and go." Upon seeing Xiao and Hong Xiao acting so intimately, Mu Fan, who was not far away, almost vomited blood. He gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, "What an idiot!" In Mu Fan's opinion, Xiao was indeed an idiot. How could she give up a treasure like the strength of living beings so easily? However, even though Mu Fan was angry, he had no other choice. If Xiao didn't intervene, no one else would stop Hong Xiao. On the other hand, Xiao Chun heaved a sigh of relief. Judging from the current situation, it was almost certain that Hong Xiao would win the force of living beings. Xiao Chun felt that Xiao's choice was reasonable. After all, when the war in the Second Wilderness had just ended and everyone was preparing to return to the First Wilderness, Xiao had already shown her concern for Hong Xiao. Moreover, Hong Xiao was the one who told him about Mu Fan. When he showed indifference, Xiao was even dissatisfied with it. It could be seen that Xiao's concern for Hong Xiao came from the bottom of her heart and wasn't fake. Therefore, Xiao's choice at this time wasn't strange. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommended. Chapter 1830. Xiao's concern for Hong Xiao was genuine. She gently stroked Hong Xiao's hair and said softly, "All right, silly girl, quickly go in." Hearing Xiao's words, Hong Xiao lifted her head and looked at Xiao with red eyes. Then she smiled and said, "Sister Xiao, thank you." After saying that, Hong Xiao ran into the door without any obstruction. Following her entry, the door slowly closed. Hong Xiao successfully entered the door. As a result, no one could open the force of living things. They could only wait for Hong Xiao to refine the power within before the force of living things finally dissipated. Everything had been settled. At the same time, Guanhong, Quanfeng, Fu Rui, Lu Xiao, Xin Yuanling, and Long Qing all stopped fighting. Since the force of living things had been obtained by Hong Xiao, there was naturally no reason for them to continue fighting. Only Xiao Chun and Mu Fan were still fighting fiercely at this time. Mu Fan did not stop completely because of the anger in his heart. He had voluntarily given up the strength of living things, but in the end, he still let Hong Xiao have her way. How could Mu Fan accept that? He attacked with hatred. However, Xiao Chun was not afraid at all. Mu Fan's bloodline of the three clans was fully unleashed, and Shao Qin's body was also displayed without any reservation. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. As for Guan Hong and the others, they had no intention of joining in. They were very clear about the hatred between Shao, Chun, and Mu Fan. However, no one wanted to interfere. After all, there was no benefit to it. However, there was one exception, and that was Yi Shao. Originally, Long Qing and Xin Yuanling saw that Mu Fan was unwilling to give up and were ready to join in. However, Yi Shao took the lead and joined in. Yi Shao immediately joined the battle. He looked coldly at Mu Fan and shouted, "Mu Fan, I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time." Yi Shao did not have a good impression of Mu Fan. Furthermore, Shao Chun was her good friend, so it was not strange for Yi Shao to make a move. With the addition of Yi Shao, Mu Fan quickly fell into a disadvantageous position while facing the attacks of two heirs at the same time. Seeing that Shao Chun and Yi Shao had no intention of stopping, in the end, Guan Hong, Quan Fong, and Lu Shao had to step in together to stop the battle from continuing. The reason why Guan Hong and the other two had acted was simple. They did not want to see Shao Chun and Yi Shao kill Mu Fan. Although Mu Fan's personality was not likable, he was still the heir of Hachibara Senkai. Furthermore, if Shao Chun and Yi Shao wanted to kill Mu Fan, even the sector lords would not agree. After stopping the fierce battle between the three of them, Guan Hong, the good guy, came out to be the peacemaker again. That's it. We are all heirs of the 8-barren immortal world. Killing each other will only benefit others. Hearing Guan Hong's words, Mu Fan did not say anything. He just snorted coldly. Humph. Then he turned and left. Now that the power of living things was useless, and he had suffered a loss at the hands of Shao Chun and Yi Shao, Mu Fan was not in the mood to stay. He quickly left with Ma Tang and the other 4 geniuses from the First Realm. Like Mu Fan, Ma Tang's expression was very ugly. The power of living things had slipped away from her just like that. Ma Tang was definitely not in a good mood. Mu Fan left with his people. Shao Chun and Yi Shao did not stop him. In fact, the two of them knew that it would not be easy to kill Mu Fan. Now was not the time. Today, the two of them had joined forces to make Mu Fan suffer such a great loss. It was already a perfect result. After Mu Fan left, the atmosphere in the field eased up. Guan Hong looked at Shao Chun and Yi Shao. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he only sighed and did not say anything. Between you and Mu Fan, originally, he wanted to persuade Shao Chun and Yi Shao. They were all the heirs of Hachibara Senkai. It was fine if some grudges could be settled. Why did they have to kill each other like this? It should be known that no matter if something happened to Mu Fan, Shao Chun, or Yi Shao, it would be the Hachibara Senkai's strength that would be lost. This was something that no one wanted to see. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, Guan Hong had already dispelled this idea. This was because he knew that with the 3 of their personalities, they would definitely not let this matter rest. Needless to say, with Mu Fan's hatred for Shao Chun and Yi Shao, he would not let this matter rest unless the sun rose from the west. As for Shao Chun and Yi Shao, they were not good people either. Once they had the chance, they would definitely kill Mu Fan without hesitation. This matter was indeed not something that could be resolved with a few words of persuasion. Therefore, Guan Hong did not say anything in the end because it would be useless. Without Mu Fan, the group naturally gathered together. As they still had to wait for Hong Xiu to refine the power of living things, they obviously could not leave Hong Xiu here alone. Therefore, the group stayed here and wanted to wait for Hong Xiu to finish refining the power of living things before returning to the first wilderness together. They gathered together, drank, and chatted. According to past practice, it would take at least a few months to refine the power of living things, so they could not leave for the time being. At the same time that the power of living things was coming to an end in the second wilderness, in the first wilderness where the Hachibara Senkai was located due to the departure of the heirs of heirs, the various realms were much more peaceful. This was especially so for the 7th realm and the 1st realm. Because Shao Chun and Mu Fan had both gone to the second wilderness, Although the people from the two realms still did not see eye to eye with each other, there were no more conflicts between them. The Hachibara Sunkai was unusually peaceful, but the first wilderness was different. Since half a month ago, there had been a lot of news that someone from the 8 wastelands had infiltrated the first wilderness. Now, there had been some unrest in the first wilderness. Someone from the 8 wastelands had secretly infiltrated the first wilderness. This was, of course, an order from the will of the heavenly way. Their purpose was very simple, which was to create some trouble for the Hachibara Senkai. Now that both sides had chosen to temporarily stop fighting, the will of the heavenly way obviously did not want the Hachibara Senkai to live so comfortably. So they created some trouble for the Hachibara Senkai. Although this would not hurt the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai, the Hachibara Senkai would definitely not ignore it. The will of the heavenly way was happy to see the Hachibara Senkai unhappy. In half a month, the unrest in the first wilderness had become more and more serious, and the Hachibara Senkai could no longer ignore it. At this time, hundreds of immortal Emperor Realm elders of the Hachibara Senkai had gathered together to discuss how to deal with the unrest in the first wilderness. There had been news that confirmed that the unrest this time was related to the 8 wastelands, but they still could not find the experts from the 8 wastelands who had infiltrated the first wilderness. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1831. The turmoil in the first wilderness was not a big deal to the Hachibara Senkai. At the very least, it was not enough to shake the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai. Hence, the Realm Lords had no intention of paying any attention to this matter. Instead, they handed it over to the elders to handle. After all, there would not be many people from the 8 Desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness this time. Furthermore, they would not be too strong. Hence, the elders were more than enough to handle this matter. The most important issue now was how to find the experts from the 8 Desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness. As long as they could find them, things would be much easier. The elders from the various realms gathered together. There were nearly 100 of them, including the Wine Taoist. Everyone, the people from the 8 Desolates have infiltrated the first wilderness. Let's talk about what we should do. An elder from the first realm who had gathered said. Hearing this, another elder said plainly, "They're just a bunch of weaklings. Just find them and kill them." The elders present scoffed at the 8 Desolation Immortal World's little tricks. After all, with the strength of the 8 Desolation Immortal World, if these little tricks were effective, the two sides wouldn't have been in a stalemate for so long. To put it bluntly, the 8 Desolates' actions this time were to annoy the Hachibara Senkai. There was no other reason for this. Hearing this elder's words, the rest of the elders nodded in agreement. They were indeed a bunch of weaklings. As long as they could find them, it would be easy to kill them. However, the problem now was how to find the experts from the 8 Desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness. For the past half a month, the Hachibara Senkai had been searching for the whereabouts of these people. However, they had not found anything so far. It seemed that these people knew about the power of the Hachibara Senkai in the first wilderness and were very good at hiding. Since they could not find the whereabouts of these people, they naturally could not take action. After some discussion, some people guessed that some forces in the first wilderness had secretly sided with the 8 Desolates. Otherwise, without the help of the local forces of the first wilderness, these people would not have been able to escape the Hachibara Senkai's search. There might be a spy in the first wilderness. This was the only explanation that could explain why the Hachibara Senkai had not found anything despite their extensive search. With such a guess, it was not an easy task to find the traitor. One should know that in the first wilderness, there were at least tens of thousands of forces, big and small. It was impossible to eliminate all these forces. Since they couldn't find any suspicious targets for now, the elders could only continue their search step by step. They continued to increase the intensity of their search while secretly investigating the various organizations in the first wilderness. That was the only way. At least for now, there was no better way. After a simple discussion, the elders dispersed one after another. Li Qiu and the Wine Taoist left the hall and returned to the first world together. Along the way, Li Qiu said to the wine Taoist. This time, I want you to be in charge of the search in the seventh world. Every world had to have an elder in charge of this search. This was the unanimous decision of the elders. Li Qiu intended to let the wine Taoist be in charge of the seventh world. This was definitely an opportunity to perform meritorious deeds, but after hearing Li Qiu's words, the wine Taoist shook his head and refused without hesitation. Spare me, I don't want it. Being in charge of this search was definitely a tiring task. The wine Taoist was unwilling to do it. The wine Taoist was lazy by nature and lived a life of drunken stupor. Now that the wine Taoist was asked to handle this matter, he was naturally unwilling. Unfortunately, in the face of the wine Taoist's refusal, Li Qiu did not give him the slightest chance and directly handed the task to him. Why must I be the one to do this? Helpless, the wine Taoist asked reluctantly. Facing the wine Taoist's question, Li Qiu let out a hearty laugh. Haha, it's because you're the most inexperienced. No one is willing to do this, so you're the only one left. There were a total of 9 elders in the seventh world. The wine Taoist was the most inexperienced, and this search for the powerhouses of the 8 barons was obviously a tough task that no one was willing to accept, including Li Qiu himself. Therefore, the wine Taoist had no choice but to hand the task over to him. Without waiting for the wine Taoist's response, Li Qiu floated away. Looking at Li Qiu's back, the wine Taoist was taken aback. Then he snarled, Li Qiu, screw you. Li Qiu didn't care if the wine Taoist agreed or not. Anyway, he had handed the task over to the wine Taoist. As for how the wine Taoist would handle it, it was up to him. With a furious roar, there was nothing the wine Taoist could do. He could only return to the first world and deal with the matter of the experts from the 8 Desolaces infiltrating the first wilderness. There was no need to worry too much about the first barons. After all, such a small matter wouldn't damage the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai. Just as the elders of the Hachibara Senkai began to deal with this matter, Mu Fan, who had suffered a huge loss in the second barons, had already left with his people. Along the way, Mu Fan's face was so gloomy that Ma Tang and the others didn't dare to approach him. Sitting alone in the starship, the murderous intent in Mu Fan's eyes didn't dissipate. On the contrary, it became even more intense. He was determined to kill Xiao Chun. After suffering losses in the hands of Xiao Chun, one could imagine how Mu Fan felt. Along the way, he thought about how to kill Xiao Chun. Just as the starship was about to activate the second barons, a glint flashed in Mu Fan's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a cold smile. He suddenly had a thought. If he succeeded, there was a high chance that he could kill Xiao Chun. Of course, it wasn't just Xiao Chun. The other heirs of Kunlun's field would probably die as well. Mu Fan didn't have much enmity towards Guanhong and the others. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame Xiao Chun. After making up his mind, Mu Fan's eyes flashed coldly as he thought coldly, Xiao Chun, you asked for it. No one knew what kind of plan Mu Fan had in mind. After pondering for a while, Mu Fan called in Ma Tang and the other 4 geniuses of the first barons. They didn't know what orders Mu Fan had for them. The 5 of them came in front of Mu Fan and were about to bow to him. However, without warning, Mu Fangfang directly punched Ma Tang in the chest. Mu Fan was caught off guard and was punched in the chest. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1832. Mu Fan had attacked without warning and killed Ma Tang with a single punch. As the number 2 figure among the younger generation in the first realm, Ma Tang's loyalty to Mu Fan was unquestionable. But now, he was killed by Mu Fan with a single punch. Spitting out a large mouthful of blood, Ma Tang looked at Mu Fan in disbelief. He had never thought that Mu Fan would suddenly make a move to kill him. Throughout the journey, Ma Tang had never done anything against Mu Fan. He didn't understand why Mu Fan wanted to kill him. His eyes were filled with doubt and sorrow as he stared at Mu Fan. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he couldn't utter a single word and fell stiffly to the ground. Ma Tang couldn't believe that he had died in Ma Tang's hands. Moreover, Ma Tang didn't understand why Mu Fan wanted to kill him. Ma Tang died on the spot due to the lack of strength in his body. When the other four geniuses saw this scene, their expressions changed drastically. They looked at Mu Fan and said in horror, "Mas, senior brother, we..." She stuttered. They didn't know what had happened that caused Mu Fan to suddenly kill them. But in the face of the threat of death, the four geniuses of the first realm were completely flustered. They stammered for a long time, but in the end, they couldn't even finish a complete sentence. Hearing their stammering, Mu Fan said with a cold expression, "I have a plan, but this plan needs to be kept a secret. No one can know about it. Mas, senior brother, we won't say anything. We will definitely keep it secret." Hearing Mu Fan's words, the four geniuses of the first realm patted their chests and promised that they would never reveal this secret. However, just as the four of them finished speaking, Mu Fan had already attacked. With Mu Fan's strength, it wasn't difficult for him to kill the four geniuses of the first realm. So soon, the four of them were killed by Mu Fan one by one, just like Ma Tang. After killing Ma Tang and the other four, Mu Fan said indifferently, "In my opinion, only the dead can keep a secret." Ma Tang had a plan in his mind. It was a plan that could kill Xiao Chun, but he couldn't let anyone know about it. Therefore, Ma Tang and the others had to die. As for killing a loyal lackey like Ma Tang, it didn't affect Mu Fan at all. If he wanted a lackey, Mu Fan could find someone else. Ma Tang wasn't irreplaceable. In order to kill Xiao Chun, Mu Fan did not hesitate to kill the 5 sky prides of the first realm who were following him. This guy was indeed a person who would stop at nothing. After killing Ma Tang and the other 4, Mu Fan did not show much emotion. He steered the starship and headed directly to the 3rd wasteland, which was close to the 2nd wasteland. The 2nd desolation was next to the 7th and 3rd desolation. Mu Fan didn't choose to go to the 7th desolation because the wills of the heavens were there. He was afraid that he would be in danger, so he went to the 3rd desolation. As for why Mu Fan went to the 3rd wilderness, think about it. If the strong people from the 8th wilderness knew that the force of all living things existed in the 2nd wilderness, and that Xiao Chun and the other heirs of the 8th wilderness were in the 2nd wilderness, what would they do? There is no doubt that if the 8th wilderness knew about this, they would definitely send strong people to kill Xiao Chun and the others. In the short term, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely not leave the 2nd wilderness because they had to wait for Hong Xiu to finish refining the force of all living things before leaving. In this way, Mu Fan could successfully kill with a borrowed knife. Unfortunately, as Mu Fan said, if he wanted to carry out this plan, he had to keep it a secret. This was because if it was revealed that he was the one who had passed the information to the 8th wilderness, Mu Fan would probably die in the end. As the heir of the Hachibara Senkai, he had secretly colluded with the 8th wilderness and killed the other heirs of the 8th wilderness. This had definitely crossed the line of the Realm Lords. Therefore, even if Mu Fan was the heir of the 8th wilderness, the result wouldn't be good. It was because of this that Mu Fan didn't hesitate to kill Ma Tang and the others. In this way, no one would know that he was the one who had done all this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Mu Fan also believed that the 8th wilderness would definitely be happy to kill Xiao Chun and the other heirs of the 8th wilderness. This was because if they succeeded, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the Hachibara Senkai. At this time, there was no one around. If anyone knew that Mu Fan had come up with this plan, they would definitely call him crazy. As the heir of the Hachibara Senkai, Mu Fan naturally knew that the Hachibara Senkai and the 8th wilderness were like fire and water. From the beginning, the two sides were destined to never coexist. There was bound to be destruction. Only then could the 8th wilderness truly return to peace. However, even if he knew that the Hachibara Senkai and the 8th wilderness were like fire and water, Mu Fan still planned to use the 8th wilderness to kill Xiao Chun and the others. If this wasn't crazy, then what was? One had to know that in the Hachibara Senkai, colluding with the 8th wilderness was definitely the most serious crime. No matter who it was, once discovered, they would definitely be killed. This was a minefield that should never be touched. However, now, in order to kill Xiao Chun, Mu Fan had completely thrown all of this to the back of his mind. Mu Fan drove the starship alone and rushed towards the third wilderness. As the third wilderness was very close to the second wilderness, and Mu Fan did not stop at all along the way, he arrived outside the third wilderness in just a few days. The third wilderness was adjacent to the second wilderness, but at the same time, it was also adjacent to the first wilderness. Therefore, the entire third wilderness was in a state of isolation all year round. It was protected by an array, and anyone who wanted to enter or leave had to go through a strict inspection. As such, it was naturally impossible for Mu Fan to enter the third wilderness. However, Mu Fan did not need to enter the third wilderness. When he arrived at the entrance of the third wilderness, the top powers from the 8th wilderness noticed Mu Fan from afar. Immediately, a celestial prime brought 2 celestial realm experts to the front of the starship that Mu Fan was in and blocked his way. Hachibara-sankai. Looking at the starship that Mu Fan was in, the celestial prime's face darkened, and he immediately prepared to attack. There was no need to hesitate when encountering people from the Hachibara-sankai. Before his voice died away, the celestial prime threw out a palm attack towards the starship that Mu Fan was in. Seeing this, Mu Fan did not panic. He also threw out a palm attack. At the same time, he said faintly, "Don't waste your energy. You're no match for me. Moreover, I have no other intention of coming here. I just have a piece of information that I believe you'll be very interested in. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote recommended." Chapter 1833. This immortal reverend was only at the beginning of the immortal reverend realm. He was responsible for guarding the entrance of the third wilderness. With his strength, he naturally wouldn't be able to hurt Mu Fan. Both of them struck out with their palms. Mu Fan easily blocked the immortal reverend's attack. Seeing this, the immortal reverend's face darkened. He couldn't help but feel nervous as he stared at Mu Fan, who was standing on the deck of the starship. Mu Fan had already put on a mask, so his face couldn't be seen clearly. Mu Fan wanted to use the 8 Desolates to kill Xiao Chun and the others. Naturally, he couldn't expose his identity. Therefore, he carefully put on a mask. Unable to recognize Mu Fan's identity, the immortal reverend was secretly on guard. At the same time, Mu Fan said in a deep voice, "The power of living beings has been discovered in the second wilderness. Currently, all the heirs of the Hachibara-sankai are in the second wilderness, and they aren't protected by the experts of the Hachibara-sankai. This is your chance to make a contribution." Without wasting any time, Mu Fan told the immortal reverend the truth about the second wilderness. Upon hearing this, the immortal reverend was stunned. He didn't expect the power of living beings to appear in the second wilderness, and that all the heirs of the Hachibara-sankai were in the second wilderness. At the same time, they weren't protected by the experts of the older generation of the Hachibara-sankai. This was indeed a great opportunity to kill all the heirs of the Hachibara-sankai in one fell swoop. A strange light flashed in his eyes. Sensing the change in the immortal reverend's expression, Mu Fan's face, which was hidden under the mask, revealed a sinister smile. Now that the news had been relayed to the people of the 8 Desolates, it wasn't up to Mu Fan to decide what to do next. However, it was difficult to find out Mu Fan's plan. After learning about this, the 8 Desolates would definitely choose to take action. With a casual toss, a letter flew directly into the immortal reverend's hand. The content of the letter was none other than the location of Xiao Chun and the others. Mu Fan had even told the 8 Desolates their exact location. Indeed, Mu Fan wanted to kill Xiao Chun and the others in one fell swoop. After doing all this, Mu Fan didn't stay any longer. He immediately drove the Starry Sky battleship away. Seeing that Mu Fan had left, the Celestial Reverend didn't attack again. After the exchange of blows just now, the Immortal Reverend knew very well that he was no match for Mu Fan at all. Mu Fan had easily blocked his attack with his full strength. This meant that Mu Fan's strength was definitely above his. As he watched Mu Fan leave, the Celestial Prime was not thinking about whether he should keep Mu Fan, but whether what Mu Fan had said was true or false. If it was true, then this was indeed a great opportunity for the 8 Desolates. An opportunity to severely injure the Hachibara Senkai. If they could kill all the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to the Hachibara Senkai. After all, the Hachibara Senkai had spent an astronomical amount of resources to cultivate Shao Chun and the other heirs of the heirs. Holding the letter that Mu Fan had just sent to him, the immortal Reverend was stunned for a while. Then, he hurriedly said, "I'm going to see the elders. You guys guard the entrance." This was a matter of great importance, so the immortal Reverend didn't dare to make a decision on his own. Naturally, he could only report the matter truthfully to the elders of the 3rd Desolates. As soon as he finished speaking, the immortal Reverend rushed into the 3rd Desolates. On a continent in the middle of the 3rd Desolates, where the elders of the 3rd Desolates were located. Because the 3rd Desolates will of the heavenly way go to the 7th Desolates. All the matters in the 3rd Desolates were decided by the elders. In a golden palace, the immortal Reverend met the 2 elders of the 3rd Desolates. There were a total of 10 elders in the 3rd Desolates. At this moment, 2 of them received the immortal Reverend and hurriedly led him into the main hall. One of the elders asked faintly, "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Elder, a mysterious man came to the entrance of the 3rd Desolates on a spaceship of the Hachibara Senkai and told me a piece of news. It's a matter of great importance, so I didn't dare to make a decision on my own. I'm here to report it to you," the immortal Reverend replied respectfully. A mysterious man from the Hachibara Senkai had come to the 3rd Desolates, and he even told us a piece of important news? Upon hearing the immortal Venerable's words, the 2 elders looked at each other, and the elder who had spoken earlier asked with a serious expression on his face, "What news?" In the face of the elder's inquiry, the Celestial Master did not dare to hide anything. He immediately told the 2 elders about the information that Mu Fan had given him. Finally, he personally handed the letter that Mu Fan had given him to the 2 elders. The letter had detailed information about the location of Shao Chun and the others. It also mentioned that there was a force of living beings there. Unfortunately, it had already been obtained by the Hachibara Senkai. After reading the letter, the 2 elders fell silent. They had to admit that this news was indeed of great importance. The heirs of the Hachibara Senkai had gathered in the 2nd Desolates, and none of them were protected by the older experts of the Hachibara Senkai. This was indeed a great opportunity. The 2 elders seemed to be weighing the pros and cons in their hearts. Since the 2 elders did not speak, the immortal Reverend naturally did not dare to speak. For a moment, the main hall fell into an eerie silence. This silence caused one to feel extremely pressured. It continued for around 10 minutes before one of the elders finally opened his mouth and asked. However, there was an additional trace of graveness in his voice at this moment. "You don't know the identity of the person who came?" Because Mu Fan was wearing a mask, he couldn't reveal his aura. Therefore, the Celestial Prime couldn't see through Mu Fan's identity. He only knew that the starship Mu Fan was on belonged to the 8 Desolation Immortal World. That person is wearing a mask, so I don't know his identity, but I'm sure that the starship he's on is definitely unique to the 8 Desolate Immortal World. The Immortal Venerable answered respectfully when he heard the elder's question. He did not know the identity of the person who came, and he could not confirm the authenticity of the information. Also, since the person came on a starship that belonged to the Hachibara Senkai, could he be a member of the Hachibara Senkai? However, if he was really a member of the Hachibara Senkai, why would he deliberately send such a message? Could he have betrayed the Hachibara Senkai? Or was there something else going on? There were too many suspicious points. For a moment, the 2 elders could not make up their minds. Please bookmark, vote, recommend. Chapter 1834. Although Mu Fan's information was very tempting, the 2 elders were not fools. Since the other party came on a spaceship of the Hachibara Senkai, it was very likely that he was a member of the Hachibara Senkai. What if this was a conspiracy by the Hachibara Senkai? It was not impossible for them to deliberately lure the experts from the 8 Desolates to the 2nd Desolates and then set up an ambush to kill them. After all, Given the relationship between the Hachibara Senkai and the Eight Desolates, they could use any means. It was normal for them to spread false information and then take the opportunity to ambush and kill them. On one hand, the information was very tempting. On the other hand, they were worried that this was a trap set by the Hachibara Senkai. Therefore, the two elders were in a dilemma. They could not make up their minds. After pondering for a while, one of them waved his hand and said to the immortal Reverend, "You can leave now. No matter what, you have contributed. When the will of the heavenly way returns, I will personally ask for your reward." Hearing the elder's words, the immortal Reverend nodded respectfully and then left the hall. After the immortal Reverend left, the two elders began to discuss. "What do you think now? I think this is an opportunity, an excellent opportunity. If we can kill the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop, even if we can't kill all of them, it can be considered a great gain." "I think so too, but we can't let our guard down. Maybe this is a trick by the Hachibara Senkai. They set up an ambush and are waiting for us to arrive." "That's true, but I think we can give it a try. Wealth comes from danger. No matter what, I don't think we should let go of this opportunity." "Well, what about the will of the heavenly way? Should we inform him?" "The will of the heavenly way is in the seventh desolates. It's useless to inform him. It takes too long to come and go. I think it's better for us to make the decision ourselves." "If that's the case, let's discuss with the other old guys and see what they think." Sure, both of them were on guard, but they were unwilling to give up this opportunity. After all, such an opportunity was hard to come by. Anyone would regret it if they missed it. Those who could become celestial emperors were naturally bold and meticulous. Therefore, after a simple discussion, they were somewhat moved. However, they weren't the only two elders in the third desolate land. Today, the will wasn't here. Therefore, they had to seek the opinions of the other 8 elders if they wanted to take action. Immediately, the two of them sent a message to the other 8 elders of the third desolation, asking them to come to the Great Hall for a meeting. Not long after, the 10 great elders gathered in the Great Hall. Looking at the two of them, the 8 elders who came later all asked curiously, "What's the matter? Why did the two of you summon us so urgently?" Since the two of them had gathered everyone here so urgently, it was obvious that something big had happened. Hearing this, the two of them passed Mu Fan's letter to the 8 of them, and then explained the situation in detail. At the end, one of them said with a serious expression, "That's how it is. What do you think?" Hearing that there was actually such a thing, the 8 elders who came later all frowned. It was obvious that they were thinking about the feasibility of this news. After a while, one of them spoke. "This is indeed a great opportunity. However, like all of you, this could be a trap by the Hachibara Senkai. It's possible, but are we going to give up on this opportunity?" Another elder said, "I don't think we should give up. How can we succeed if we are always afraid of the wolf in front and the tiger behind? Since we have such an opportunity now, we just need to be on guard. I think we should take action," another elder said. Although they were worried that this might be a trap by the Hachibara Senkai, after a discussion, most of them felt that they should seize this opportunity. After all, nothing in this world was guaranteed. Everything had its risks. It all depended on whether the reward was worth it. To the elders, if they could kill a bunch of heirs from the 8 barren immortal world, it was worth the risk. Of course, they didn't mean that they didn't need to prepare at all. They just rushed into the second barren immortal world like that. Everyone felt that they should take action. They could not let this great opportunity go to waste. After a discussion, the 10 elders decided to take action. However, they had to be on guard against the Hachibara Senkai. According to the elders, they would split into 2 teams, one at the front and one at the back. The great sage would lead the way for the team in front. Of course, there was no need to tell them anything. They were only told to go to the location that Mu Fan had given them to check it out. To put it simply, the great sage in front would be cannon fodder. If this was really a trap by the Hachibara Senkai, they would definitely be attacked. Then, the elders and the strong cultivators of the third wilderness, who were far behind, would be able to retreat easily. On the other hand, if nothing strange happened along the way, and there were indeed many heirs at the location that Mu Fan had given them, they would attack and kill the Hachibara Senkai's heirs. The elders had no objections to this plan. In the end, they had to decide how many people to send to the second wilderness. They did not need to think too much about the cannon fodder at the front. They only needed a few, the great sage. As for how many people to send later, that would require planning. After a discussion, the 10 elders of the third wilderness decided to send 7 elders to personally lead the team. In addition, they would also send 20 strong cultivators who had completed the Immortal Venerables. There were a total of 27 people. Although it was not a large number, all of them were strong cultivators. Such a force should be enough to deal with the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai. The third wilderness had a total of 10 elders. This time, 7 of them would be sent. As for the remaining 3, they would naturally leave the third wilderness alone. After all, the third wilderness was adjacent to the first wilderness. It was impossible that there would be no immortal emperor guarding it. After reaching an agreement, 2 starships flew out from the third wilderness, one after the other. Xiao Chun and the others were still unaware of Mu Fan's actions in the third wilderness. Moreover, they did not know that danger was getting closer and closer to them. A total of 7 immortal emperors and 20 strong cultivators who had completed the Immortal Venerables were rushing towards the second wilderness. Such a force was not something that Xiao Chun and the others could contend with. Although Xiao Chun and the others were heirs, it was still impossible for them to deal with the immortal emperors. After all, there was a gap of 2 realms between them. The difference in cultivation was too great. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 1835. Xiao Chun and the others obviously did not expect that Mu Fan would not hesitate to use the 8 desolates to kill them. This was definitely a taboo. Previously, no matter what Mu Fan did, everyone only thought that it was because of his personality. Although Mu Fan had almost killed Yi Xiao several times, which made Yi Xiao hate him to the core, other than Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao, Guan Hong and the others did not hate Mu Fan. Of course, they had some opinions, but they definitely did not hate him. After all, they were all heirs of Hachibara Senkai, so such a small matter would not make Guan Hong and the others hate Mu Fan. Everything that had happened before could be attributed to private fights or personal grudges between them. However, this time, Mu Fan had leaked the news to the 8 desolates and wanted to use the 8 desolates to get rid of Xiao Chun and the others. This was definitely crossing the line. Once people knew about it, even Guan Hong and the others would not let Mu Fan go. Unfortunately, until now, no one knew what Mu Fan had done. They also did not know that the 7 immortal Emperor Realm Elders of the Third Wilderness had brought 20 Immortal Venerables, who were in the complete Immortal Venerables realm, to the Second Wilderness. They were completely unprepared. Everyone was still guarding outside the force of living beings, waiting for Hong Xiu to come out of seclusion. Days passed. In the Second Wilderness, there was no spiritual chi of heaven and earth, so no one could cultivate it all. They could only gather together to drink and chat every day. Since there was no way to cultivate, they could only drink and chat. However, such days were leisurely. To be honest, with such an opportunity, everyone, including Xiao Chun, could relax. After all, as heirs of heirs, they did not have an easy time in the Hachibara Senkai. First, it was because of their cultivation. As heirs of heirs, no one wanted to be left behind by their peers. Therefore, everyone cultivated with all their might. Secondly, there were many troublesome matters in the various realms that required the heirs of heirs to deal with. As a result, the heirs of heirs did not really have much free time. Of course, among the heirs of heirs, Xiao Chun was probably the one with the most free time. This was because Xiao Chun basically left the matters of the 7th realm to Yu Shu Jin to deal with. He would not intervene unless there was something that Yu Shu Jin could not decide. Only then would Xiao Chun step in. What Xiao Chun really spent most of his time on was his training, which he immersed himself in every day. During this period of time, Xiao Chun was unable to cultivate due to the absence of the spirit chi of heaven and earth. It was rare for him to get together with everyone to chat and drink. However, such a gathering had really brought everyone closer to each other, and everyone could feel it However, Xiao Chun and the others clearly did not realize that danger was constantly approaching. The experts of the third wilderness were getting closer and closer to the second wilderness. Time passed day by day. There was still no news from Hong Xiao. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others were not too worried about this. After all, it was still early. It had not even been a month. Hong Xiao obviously could not refine the power of living beings in such a short time. They could only wait patiently. After all, no one could interfere with Hong Xiao now. The light gate had long disappeared. Hong Xiao was refining the power of living beings alone. As Xiao Chun and the others waited patiently, a few days passed. On this day, a starship quietly flew into the second wilderness. This starship naturally came from the third wilderness. However, there were only 2 great saint sovereigns and 3 quasi-saint great sovereigns on this starship. They flew all the way to the second desolate. At this moment, the 2 great saint sovereigns were sitting together and chatting casually. What do you think is in the second wilderness? Why were we sent to explore, and even the location was given to us? One of them asked doubtfully. The 5 people on this starship were the cannon fodder prepared by the elders. If the Hachibara Sunkai had an ambush, they would undoubtedly die. The other starship behind them could retreat easily. However, the great sage obviously didn't know this. They didn't even know that there was a starship behind them. They only knew that they came to the second wilderness under orders to search. As for what they were searching for, they didn't know. It could be said that they were in the dark. Other than the location, the great sage knew nothing. They only knew that they had to hurry to this location. They sped through the second wilderness and did not encounter any ambushes along the way. There was nothing out of the ordinary. At this time, the elders of the third wilderness, who were far behind, decided to speed up and rush to where Xiao Chun and the others were. The 2 sides were already very close. At the same time, the great sage and the 3 quasi-sage great masters in front were about to reach where Xiao Chun and the others were. The sudden appearance of a starship naturally attracted Xiao Chun's attention. At this time, Xiao Chun and the others had already discovered the starship. They gathered together, and the heirs said with a serious expression, "It's a starship from the third wilderness. What should we do?" Guan Hong was the first to speak. "Can you confirm how many people there are?" Quan Feng asked. "I don't know yet, but it's just a starship. There shouldn't be many people," Chiu Ru replied. It was a genius from the 5th realm who discovered the starship, so Chiu Ru obviously knew the situation best. It was just a starship. Therefore, even if it was fully loaded, there shouldn't be many people. Hearing Chiu Ru's words, Lu Xiao, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. "The only question now is, why did this starship appear here? Did it come here specifically, or did it just happen to pass by? Has our position been exposed? If that's the case, then we're in danger." First of all, they had to figure out whether this starship was just passing by or coming directly for them. The difference between the 2 was huge. If it was just passing by, they could just kill it directly. But if it was coming for Xiao Chun and the others, they had to be careful. After all, they didn't have the protection of the older generation of Hachibara Senkai. If they were surrounded and killed by the 8 barons, the result would probably be disastrous. Everyone agreed with Lu Xiao. Then Fu Ruwei took the initiative to say, "Let's try and find out. I'll take some people to try. Please add, vote, recommend." Chapter 1836. Fu Ruwei's method was indeed the simplest. They just had to give it a try to find out if the starship was just passing by, or if it was purposely coming for Xiao Chun and the others. If the starship was weak, it obviously wasn't coming for them. On the other hand, if the starship was well prepared, it was obvious that the news about the second wilderness had been leaked. The 8 barons had come prepared to kill the heirs of Kunlun. Hearing Fu Ruwei's words, everyone nodded. Finally, after some discussion, Fu Ruwei, Chiu Ru, and Quan Feng decided to lead their young geniuses to test the starship first. As for the others, they would support them in the dark. If the starship was too weak, they would eliminate it directly. With the decision made, everyone began to prepare. At the same time, Guan Hong, the kind old man, had purposely found Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao. Apparently, he had something to say. Brother Xiao Chun, brother Yi Xiao, Guanhong hesitated as he looked at the two of them. Seeing this, a strange glint flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes, as if he had already guessed what Guanhong wanted to say. On the other hand, Yi Xiao, who was beside him, said heartlessly, "Brother Guanhong, if you have something to say, just say it. Why are you hemming and hawing?" Yi Xiao didn't notice anything. Seeing this, Guanhong exhorted for a moment. Then he looked up at the two and said in one breath, "Brother Xiao Chun, brother Yi Xiao, there's something I think we should make plans for. If the news about the second wilderness has been leaked and the 8 barons have come prepared, then we should prepare to evacuate. After all, we can't fight against the 8 barons by ourselves. Besides, we don't have any strong Hachibara Sunkai accompanying us." When Guanhong mentioned the evacuation, Nightingale said nonchalantly, "That's for sure. If Bahuang came prepared, we will definitely evacuate. Don't tell me we're just going to wait for our deaths here." Yi Xiao didn't react at first, but when he said that, he was stunned. Retreating meant giving up on Hong Xiao. Because Hong Xiao was now in the force of living beings, it was impossible to take her away. Once everyone was gone, Hong Xiao would not know what was going on outside. Once she came out, she would definitely be captured by the 8 desolates. As for asking for help from the Hachibara Sunkai, it was obviously too late. Even if he used the voice-transmitting charm, it would be too late by the time the Hachibara Sunkai experts arrived. It was also for this reason that Guanhong had a hesitant look on his face. His expression instantly turned ugly. Yi Xiao could not help but turn to look at Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Xiao Chun said with a solemn expression, "Let's observe the situation first." Indeed, what Guanhong said would happen. If the news about the second barons was leaked, the best choice for everyone would be to evacuate. But this way, it would mean that they had given up on Hong Xiao. This matter was unsolvable and Xiao Chun had no solution. However, Xiao Chun had decided that if the news about the second barons was leaked, Xiao Chun would definitely stay behind. Even if he wasn't a match for the 8 barons, he wouldn't abandon Hong Xiao. When Xiao Qing, Bai Riyue, and Qin Shi died, Xiao Chun swore that from then on, he would never abandon anyone by his side and escape. Therefore, if the news was leaked, Xiao Chun would stay behind alone and get the others to evacuate. As for the outcome, Xiao Chun didn't care. At most, he would die here with Hong Xiao. He wouldn't abandon anyone and didn't want to suffer the pain of losing someone by his side. Of course, Xiao Chun couldn't tell anyone about this decision. He spoke to appease Yi Xiao. Hearing this, Guanhong nodded silently. Then, the group headed towards the starship. Fu Rue, Qiu Ru, and Lu Xiao led the attack while the others hid in the surroundings to provide support. It was just a test. As soon as they started fighting, Xiao Chun and the others found that there were only 5 people on the starship. Moreover, the strongest were only 2, the Great Sage. This kind of strength was no threat to them at all. They easily dealt with the 5 people and destroyed their starship. Everyone returned and gathered together. At this time, everyone couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. It seems that we were overthinking. The news shouldn't have leaked. This starship must have passed by chance, Lu Xiao said to everyone. That should be the case. Maybe the 8 desolations is also searching for the second desolation. Xiaoru nodded in agreement. Everyone thought that the matter was over, but Xiao Chun didn't say anything. Intuition told Xiao Chun that things weren't so simple. All along, Xiao Chen's intuition had been very sharp and accurate. At this time, Xiao Chen's intuition kept telling him that a great danger was approaching them. There was a trace of uneasiness in his heart, but Xiao Chun couldn't tell where this feeling came from. Therefore, Xiao Chun was at a loss. After dealing with the starship from the 3rd desolation, everyone was temporarily relieved. After a simple discussion, they dispersed. At this time, Xiao Chun came to the deck alone. He looked at the darkness around him with a faint light in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Just when Xiao Chun was alone in his thoughts, Long Qing came behind Xiao Chun and asked with concern, "What's wrong, little brother?" In fact, when everyone was discussing before, Long Qing had already noticed Xiao Chen's abnormality. After all, as Xiao Qin's second sister, Longqing knew Xiao Qin very well. Unfortunately, in the face of Longqing's question, Xiao Qin shook his head and didn't answer. Seeing this, Longqing didn't ask anymore. She came to Xiao Qin's side and said with a faint smile on her face, "Little brother, I will never leave you again." After hearing Longqing's words, Xiao Qin smiled and the worries in his heart dissipated a lot. It was a silent night. On the second day, although there was no sun or moon in the second desolation, everyone still knew the time. Around noon, suddenly, another starship came into their sight. It was also from the third desolation. Needless to say, this starship was naturally the one that the 7 elders of the third desolation were on. They had already arrived. Xiao Qin and the others discovered it immediately, but it was too late. The danger had really arrived. The heirs gathered together again. Everyone had a look of confusion on their faces. Yi Xiao couldn't help but ask, "Why is there another one? What the hell is going on in the third desolation?" Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1837. Just one night later, another starship from the third wasteland was flying towards them. Yi Xiao was very upset about this, but Xiao Qin, who was sitting next to him, said with a serious expression, "The news must have been leaked." Xiao Qin was sure that Ba Huang must have found out about what happened in the second wasteland. Otherwise, why would there be starships appearing in the second wasteland one after another? It would make sense if the starship from yesterday happened to pass by. But what about today? It was impossible to send 2 starships in a row. Yi Xiao still had some hope in his heart, but Xiao Qin was sure that Ba Huang must have found out about what happened and came here specifically for them. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Yi Xiao's face immediately darkened, and Fu Rue said, "What should we do then? Let's retreat. Judging from the current situation, Ba Huang must be prepared. I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to deal with them," Xiao Qin said calmly. They didn't know how the news was leaked, but one thing was certain. Since Ba Huang came here specifically for them, it would be difficult for them to resist with their strength. Since the other party was prepared, Xiao Qin and the others couldn't fight head-on. They could only choose to retreat. Hearing this, the others didn't have any objections, but Yi Xiao said unwillingly, "Then what about junior sister? What about Hongxiu?" Yi Xiao was most concerned about Hongxiu. Hearing this, Xiao Qin chose to remain silent, because once they retreated, Hongxiu would naturally be abandoned. However, there was something that Xiao Qin had yet to tell everyone. That was, Xiao Qin's intention was for everyone to evacuate while he stayed behind. Xiao Qin didn't tell everyone what he was thinking. After a moment of silence, Xiao Qin said, "There's no time to lose. Get ready as soon as possible." Hearing this, Guanhong and the others dispersed and immediately began to prepare to leave. At the same time, on the same starship, Yi Xiao looked at Xiao Qin unhappily after Guanhong and the others left. "Xiao Qin, are you going to give up on your junior sister just like that?" Hongxiu was still in the force of living beings. If everyone left, wouldn't Hongxiu be finished? If she fell into the hands of the 8 desolates, her fate would be obvious. In the face of Yi Zhao's displeasure, Xiao Qin's expression did not change much. He just said calmly, "If we stay, we will all die here." After saying that, Xiao Qin didn't care about Yi Zhao's attitude. He turned around and left. Seeing Xiao Qin's departing figure, Yi Zhao's eyes flashed with anger. From Yi Zhao's point of view, it was unacceptable that Xiao Qin had given up on Hongxiu so decisively. Hongxiu had always treated Xiao Qin so well, but now that danger had arrived, Xiao Qin had actually fled. Yi Xiao obviously didn't know what Xiao Qin was thinking. Xiao Qin's idea was very simple. He couldn't let everyone stay and die. Since the 8 desolates already knew about the second desolates, they must have made preparations. Under such circumstances, even if everyone stayed here, they would probably be wiped out in the end. He could stay here alone. Anyway, the result would be the same. It was better to stay alone than to be wiped out. Xiao Qin went all the way to the cockpit of the starship. He instructed one of the 7th Realm's sky prides to follow the route that everyone had discussed. He didn't need to worry about anything. He just needed to pilot the starship and do his best. After doing all this, Xiao Chen returned to his room alone and left a letter for Long Qing and Xian Yuanling. His purpose was to tell them that they must treat Luan Luan well, not only because of Luan Luan, but also because Luan Luan might be the key to resurrecting Qin Shi and the others. Xiao Chen couldn't abandon Hongxiu and escape by himself, so he naturally had to tell them these things. As for Xiao Chen's actions, no one else noticed anything. Soon, about 15 minutes later, all the heirs were ready. The 6 starships started moving slowly and started retreating in the direction that they had agreed on. On the 7th realm starship, Yi Xiao looked furious. There were several times when he wanted to take his people and leave directly to guard Hongxiu. However, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling stopped him. Although no one wanted to abandon Hongxiu directly, Xiao Chen was right. Everyone would probably die in the end if they stayed. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling stopped Yi Xiao. Facing the furious Yi Xiao, Xian Yuanling tried to comfort him. Yi Xiao, if we stay here, we'll die. Only by staying alive can we save Hongxiu in the future. T. Don't you know what will happen if Hongxiu falls into the hands of the 8 Baron? Yi Xiao immediately shouted angrily. Facing Yi Xiao's angry shout, Long Qing continued. The 8 Baron might not kill Hongxiu directly. They might capture her. Then we'll have a chance to save her. Ba Huang might not have directly killed Hongxiu after saving her. Yi Xiao was slightly taken aback when he heard this. That was indeed a possibility. However, when he thought that he was about to abandon Hongxiu, Yi Xiao felt extremely conflicted. Looking around, he didn't see Xiao Chen at all. Yi Xiao said coldly, "Where's Xiao Chen? Where did he run off to at this time?" Xiao Chen didn't even appear. Yi Xiao didn't know why, but he was furious. He felt that Xiao Chen didn't care about Hongxiu at all. In the face of Yi Xiao's questioning, Long Qing replied, "Little brother is in his room. Yi Xiao, I'm sure he's more upset than you are." Long Qing naturally wanted to speak up for Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao snorted coldly, but didn't say anything else. Seeing this, Xian Yuanling said slowly, "There's only hope if we're alive. If we're all dead, who's going to save Hongxiu?" There was only hope if they were alive. Yi Xiao fell silent when he heard Xian Yuanling's words. The 6 spaceships immediately set off and began to break out of the encirclement. At the same time, the 7 elders of the 3rd Baron were rushing towards the location that Mu Fan had provided. At the same time, they had sent a few immortal sovereigns to investigate ahead of time. It had to be said that the 7 elders of the 3rd Desolation were very cautious because they were afraid that this might be a conspiracy of the 8th Desolation immortal realm. It was because of this caution that Xiao Chen and the others had a chance to escape. At this time, everyone had already retreated. The 7 elders of the 3rd Baron also received the news at this time. In the spaceship, an immortal sovereign said respectfully, "Elder, we've discovered 6 spaceships of the Hachibura Sunkai, but they seem to have escaped. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1838. Out of caution, the 7 elders did not rush over immediately. Instead, they sent a few celestial primes to check the situation first. When they heard that there were 6 spaceships from the 8th Desolation immortal world that were preparing to escape, the 7 elders' faces changed. At this moment, they were finally certain that the news that Mu Fan had given them was true. One of the elders stood up abruptly and said with a gloomy face, "Surround them, quick." If the news was true, then this was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They could not let the heirs of Hachibura Sunkai escape. Hearing this, the immortal venerables nodded respectfully and replied, "Yes, we have already taken action to delay them." The few immortal venerables who had rushed over to check the situation decided to take action immediately after they found out that the news was true. They wanted to delay Xiao Chen and the others. They should have already started fighting by now. Hearing the immortal venerable's words, the elder nodded and said, "All right, we will rush over immediately." Soon, the 7 elders from the 3rd Desolation made their arrangements. 4 of them abandoned their spaceships and led 10 immortal venerables to take a detour in front of Shao Chun and the others. The remaining 3 surrounded Shao Chun and the others. They were determined to surround Shao Chun and the others. They could not give the heirs of Hachibara Sankai the slightest chance to break out of the encirclement. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, one step too slow, one step too slow. The 7 elders' initial caution and hesitation had caused them to miss the best opportunity to surround Shao Chun and the others. On the other hand, Shao Chun's prompt decision to let them break out of the encirclement was also the last chance to survive. While the 7 elders from the Third Desolation were making their arrangements, Guanhong and the others had already started fighting with the immortal venerables from the Third Desolation. The 6 spaceships started moving at full speed and broke out of the encirclement. At the same time, Guanhong, Fu Rui, Qiu Ru, Quan Feng, Lu Xiao, and Yi Xiao also took action. There were a total of 4 immortal venerables from the Third Desolate, trying to hold them back. Everyone knew that they absolutely couldn't stop now. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to break out of the encirclement once they were surrounded. Obviously, Guanhong was at a disadvantage in the fierce battle with an immortal venerable. Fortunately, his opponent was only at the great perfection immortal venerable realm. Although Guanhong was no match for him, he could still contend with him for a while. While fighting fiercely, Guanhong shouted angrily at the geniuses of various realms who were in charge of piloting the starship. "Don't stop! Charge forward!" Many heirs blocked the 4 immortal primes from the Third Barren territory, not giving them a chance to attack the starship. Now, the starship was their only hope of survival. This was because the speed of a starship was definitely faster than a cultivator. As long as they successfully rushed out, their speed would increase. At that time, even an immortal emperor wouldn't be able to catch up with them. Therefore, the only thing that Guanhong and the others needed to do was to protect the starship and escape successfully. Upon hearing Guanhong shout, the geniuses of various realms who were in charge of piloting the starship didn't hesitate at all. They immediately went all out, trying to break through the blockade of the 4 immortal primes. Seeing that Guanhong and the others were about to break through the blockade, the 4 immortal primes' hearts sank. Their attacks became more and more terrifying, intending to stop Guanhong and the others at the cost of their lives. Both sides calmly went all out. However, in the Third Barren territory, due to the caution of the 7 elders, they were still 1 step behind. Therefore, it was indeed a little difficult for the 4 immortal primes to stop Guanhong and the others. It should be known that as heirs of heirs, Guanhong and the others were not only powerful, but they also had countless treasures. Seeing that the 6 starships had broken through the blockade of the 4 immortal primes, Guanhong and the others didn't hesitate and immediately used their life-saving trump cards. Although these life-saving trump cards couldn't kill the 4 perfected immortal venerables, it was still enough to force them to retreat. At this moment, Guanhong and the others didn't hesitate to use the life-saving trump cards that they usually couldn't bear to use. Upon seeing this, the faces of the 4 celestial venerables darkened. However, there was nothing they could do as they were sent flying away. At the same time, Guanhong and the others seized the opportunity to return to their spaceship. Then, the 6 spaceships started to move at full speed, vanishing from the spot in just a blink of an eye. The starships that the heirs of heirs were on were definitely the best starships in the Hachibara Senkai. Not to mention immortal emperors, even the sector lords and the will of the heavenly way couldn't catch up with them. It was common knowledge that the starships were faster than the cultivators themselves. Seeing the starships disappear quickly, the 4 immortal primes who had been injured by the life-saving trump cards of Guanhong and the others couldn't care less about their injuries. Their eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as they stared in the direction where Guanhong and the others had retreated. They couldn't believe that they had let such a great opportunity slip away. Less than 10 breaths of time after Guanhong and the others had escaped, the 4 elders of the Third Wilderness arrived with 10 immortal primes. Looking at the battle that had ended and the 6 starships that had disappeared, The four elders' faces were extremely gloomy. One of them said coldly, "They ran away." Hearing this, the four immortal venerables lowered their heads and remained silent. Seeing this, even though the elder was furious, he knew that they had done their best when he saw the injuries on their bodies. They could only blame themselves for being a step too late. Because they had retreated in time, Guanhong and the others had managed to escape. They were all secretly relieved as they sat on the starship. However, on the starship of the seventh world, Yi Xiao wasn't happy at all. On the contrary, Yi Xiao came to Xiao Qin's room with a gloomy face. Ignoring Long Qing and Xian Yuanling's attempts to stop him, he pushed open the door and shouted angrily, "Xiao Qin, come out now." Yi Xiao was already furious when Xiao Qin decided to give up on Hong Xiu without hesitation. Just now, when everyone was fighting fiercely, Xiao Qin didn't appear from the beginning to the end. At that time, they didn't have time to care about this. Now that they had successfully broken out of the encirclement, Yi Xiao came to question Xiao Qin angrily. Unfortunately, in the face of Yi Xiao's angry shout, there was no response from the room. Xiao Qin was nowhere to be found in Xiao Qin's room. After looking around, there was no one in the room except for a letter on the table. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling were stunned when they saw this. They had a bad premonition in their hearts. Ignoring Yi Xiao, they immediately came to the table, picked up the letter that Xiao Qin left behind, and read it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1839. The content of Xiao Qin's letter was simple. He told Long Qing and Xian Yuanling that he would stay behind to protect Hongxiu. Big brother, second sister, I've chosen to stay behind. I've experienced the pain of losing someone by my side once, and I'm not willing to abandon anyone else. Don't worry. If I'm safe, I will return to the first wilderness myself. If I die, big brother, second sister, please take care of Luan Luan for me. She is the chance to revive Shuru and the others. In the future, I may need to trouble big brother and his second sister to take care of them. It was an extremely simple sentence without the slightest bit of emotion. It was as though he was stating a simple fact. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling finally understood Xiao Qin's intentions. Xiao Qin had asked everyone to evacuate while Long Qing and Xian Yuanling stayed behind. From the start, Xiao Qin knew that even if everyone stayed behind, the outcome would still be the same. They would definitely be wiped out. That was why Xiao Qin allowed everyone to break out of the encirclement while he stayed behind alone. Xiao Qin chose to stay behind because he wasn't willing to abandon Hongxiu. After all, no matter what, it wouldn't feel good to be abandoned. Besides, Xiao Qin wasn't willing to abandon anyone else by his side. That was why even though Xiao Qin knew that he would die, he was willing to stay behind to accompany Hongxiu. Both of them stood on the spot blankly. Upon seeing this, Yi Xiao approached them dubiously. When he saw the letter in Long Qing's hand, Yi Xiao finally understood what was going on. It turned out that Xiao Qin had no intention of abandoning Hongxiu and escaping alone. The reason why he said that was because he wanted everyone to leave as soon as possible. There was no need for everyone to die together. It was better to die alone than to die together. It was enough for him to accompany Hongxiu alone. Apparently, he had misunderstood Xiao Qin. Yi Xiao froze on the spot. At the same time, after a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Long Qing suddenly said, "No, I have to go back and save my younger brother." Xiao Qin didn't want to abandon anyone around him, and Long Qing was the same. Therefore, after learning that Xiao Qin chose to stay alone, Long Qing's first reaction was to go back. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xian Yuanling did not have the slightest objection. Immediately, the two of them prepared to pilot the starship back. However, after sensing the abnormality of the seventh world starship, Guanhong and the others also rushed over. After learning that Xiao Qin had stayed behind alone, Guanhong and the others worked together to stop Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and Yi Xiao from going back to die in vain. They knew how the three of them felt and could empathize with them. However, Now that they had broken out of the encirclement, if Long Qing and the others turned back, they would only die with Xiao Chun. Knowing that they would die, Guan Hong and the others naturally could not let Long Qing and the others go. After subduing the three of them, the Seventh World starship flew along the predetermined route. As for Xiao Chun, although Guan Hong and the others also felt bad, there was nothing they could do. If they went back now, they would definitely be walking into a trap. Guan Hong and the others successfully escaped because of Xiao Chen's decisiveness. At this time, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, and Xiu Ru were on the Seventh World starship. As for Long Qing, Xin Yuanling, and Yi Xiao, the three of them had been successfully subdued. With his cultivation sealed, Long Qing looked angrily at Guan Hong and the others in front of him and said, "Let go of me. I have to go save my little brother." Long Qing, calm down. We are also very sad about Xiao Chen's situation. However, if we go back now, what else can we do other than die with Xiao Chun? Guan Hong said with disappointment when he heard Long Qing's words. Xiao Chun let the others escape, but he chose to stay. This was not what Guan Hong had expected. No one had expected Xiao Chun to make such a choice. Guan Hong paused and then continued. Xiao Chun let us escape. If we go back now, wouldn't Xiao Chen's good intentions go to waste? Moreover, if you die, who will take care of Luan Luan? Luan Luan. Upon hearing this, Long Qing and Xin Yuanling fell silent. Yes, Xiao Chen had already told them to take good care of Luan Luan. Luan Luan could be said to be the only hope of reviving Qin Shu and the others. She was also Xiao Chen's hope. If the two of them died, who would take care of Luan Luan? Who would revive Qin Shuru and the others? Long Qing and Xin Yuanling were silent. With regards to this, Guan Hong did not say anything. With the current situation, it was impossible for Guan Hong to have any misgivings about what the two of them were thinking. In any case, it was impossible for him to allow the two of them to return and die in vain. Without giving the two of them a choice, Guan Hong and the others forcibly brought Long Qing, Xin Yuanling, and Yi Xiao out of the second wilderness. Now is not the time to relax. Who knew if the people from Ba Huang were still chasing after them? Therefore, they could not stop, let alone turn back. In fact, Guan Hong did not feel good about making such a choice. However, his rationality told him that he could not turn back, otherwise everyone would die. Guan Hong's caution was not wrong, because the four elders of the third wilderness had not given up. They were still chasing after them, but there was not much hope left. Even though the four of them were immortal emperors, it was still impossible for them to catch up with the spaceship. While Guan Hong and the others were fleeing, the spaceship of the third wilderness was rapidly approaching the force of living beings. The three elders on the starship had already received the news that Guan Hong and the others had broken out of the encirclement. Since they couldn't stop Guan Hong and the others, it was too late to chase after them. Therefore, the three elders piloted the starship and arrived outside the force of beings. From afar, the three of them could feel the chi of the force of living beings. One of them said regretfully, "What a pity. All our efforts were in vain in the end." Someone's here. Indeed, it was a pity. However, as soon as the elder's voice faded, another elder spoke anxiously. Someone. When the three elders heard that, they looked forward. Indeed, there was a person sitting in front of them. He was a branch family member, sitting alone in the starry sky. The spaceship slowly approached the person. This person was none other than Xiao Chun, who had chosen to stay behind alone. Apparently, the three elders knew Xiao Chun and recognized Xiao Chun's identity at first glance. Xiao Chun, the heir of the seventh realm? Xiao Chun, are you courting death? The others have already fled. Only you stay behind. Huh? Xiao Chun, are you going to stay behind and stop us? Do you think you can do it? Or should I say, you're courting death? The three elders sneered one after another. They did not expect that Xiao Chun was still here. For a moment, the three elders were in a good mood. Facing the three elders' sneers, Xiao Chun, who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the three elders standing on the spaceship and said indifferently, There are many things that you must do even though you know it's impossible. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1840. At this moment, the starship of the Third Wilderness was slowly approaching Shao Chun. Guan Hong and the others would definitely not be able to catch up with it. However, it was a pleasant surprise to meet Shao Chun, the heir of the Seventh Realm. On the deck, the three elders and several eldest sons of immortal venerables were looking at Shao Chun mockingly. As the heir of the Hachibara Senkai's Seventh Realm, Shao Chun's combat strength was invincible among his peers. However, Shao Chun was now facing three elders at the Immortal Emperor Realm and several experts at the Great Perfection of the Immortal Venerable Realm. Even if Shao Chun was the heir of the Seventh Realm, what could he do against such a lineup? Upon hearing Shao Chun's words, one of the elders sneered. You know it's impossible, but you still want to do it? Ha ha, Shao Chun, do you mean that you're courting death? In fact, the three elders were also puzzled as to why Shao Chun was here. Since Guan Hong and the others were able to break out of the encirclement, Shao Chun definitely had a chance to escape. However, Shao Chun did not leave. Instead, it seemed that Shao Chun had taken the initiative to wait for their arrival. Since he could leave, why didn't Shao Chun leave? In the face of the elders' mockery, Shao Chun's expression did not change at all. He still said indifferently, courting death? Whatever. I just don't want to run anymore. Shao Chun really didn't want to run anymore, especially not when he wanted to leave the people around him behind and run away alone. This time, Shao Chun did have a chance to escape. As long as he followed Guan Hong and the others, Shao Chun would definitely be able to escape from the Second Wilderness. However, what would happen after he escaped? Hong Xiu would be alone here. After she finished refining the power of living beings, what would she do if she saw the expert from the Eighth Wilderness when she came out? On the other hand, would she feel good about Shao Chun? Instead of enduring such pain, Shao Chun would rather stay. Even if he had to die, so what? His face was as calm as an ancient well. Upon seeing this, the elder from the Third Desolate Land, who had spoken earlier, was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he coldly laughed. Haha, forget it. This old man does not wish to dwell on why you are here. However, since this is the case, I believe that handing you over to the Seventh Desolate Lands should be a good choice. I heard that you used to be the first holy son of the Seventh Wilderness, but later you defected to the Hachibara Senkai. Although the three elders were curious as to why Shao Chun was here, they did not dwell on it. Regardless of the reason, Shao Chun had nowhere to run now. Capturing Shao Chun and handing him over to the will of the Heavenly Way was indeed a great achievement. The seventh will of the Heavenly Way would probably be even happier. The seventh will of the Heavenly Way wanted to kill Shao Chun. This was no secret in the Eighth Wilderness. They always wanted to kill Shao Chun. Now that they had the opportunity to capture Shao Chun and hand him over to the seventh will of the Heavenly Way, they would definitely reward him. Shao Chun's eyes flashed with fighting spirit after hearing what the elder said. He then said plainly, "Let's do it." From the moment Shao Chun decided to stay, he had never thought of doing so. Hearing Shao Chun's words, the three elders of the Third Wilderness's face darkened. Then they shouted coldly, "Take him down." The three elders had no intention of attacking. Shao Chun was the only one present. There was no way for him to escape. Therefore, the three elders were enjoying the feeling of playing a game of cat and mouse. After all, Shao Chun's identity wasn't ordinary. He was the heir of the Seventh Realm. He could be considered as the core figure of the Hachibara Senkai. Upon hearing the words of the three elders, several immortal venerables behind the three elders struck at the same time. There were a total of 6 of them, and it was impossible for Shao Chun to deal with them. After all 6 of them had reached the great perfection of the immortal venerable realm. In a one-on-one situation, Shao Chun wouldn't be able to defeat them. Now that he was facing 6 of them, Shao Chun didn't stand chance. However, Shao Chun didn't show the slightest fear in the face of the 6 great perfection immortal venerables. With the Wu Chun sword in hand, Xiao Qian's qi soared to the sky. At first, his qi was at the great perfection of the immortal realm. But soon, Xiao Qian's qi began to rise in an extremely violent manner, breaking through the great perfection of the immortal realm in a flash. Such an abnormal increase caused the expressions of the three elders from the third wasteland on the starship to change. One of them even shouted with a solemn face, "Don't underestimate us. Ignite your bloodline." The abnormal rise in Xiao Qian's qi was obviously due to the ignition of his bloodline power. With the ignition of his bloodline power, Xiao Qian's qi became much stronger. At the same time, his face revealed an unnatural flush. Apparently, his qi had reached the great perfection of the immortal realm. In response, the elder who spoke earlier paused for a moment before continuing coldly. "So what? Xiao Chun, you're already a turtle in a jar today. There's no way you can escape." Facing the siege of 6 great perfection immortal venerables, Xiao Chun decisively ignited his bloodline power. It was indeed unexpected, but so what? Xiao Chun still couldn't change anything. Not to mention the 3 immortal emperor elders. Just the 6 great perfection immortal venerables weren't something that Xiao Chun could deal with even by igniting his blood essence. However, Xiao Chun had never thought of changing anything. Upon hearing the elder's words, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "I've never thought of running away. If I wanted to run away, I wouldn't have waited until now." Indeed, Xiao Chun had never thought of running away. As soon as his voice faded, Xiao Chun took the initiative to attack. He slashed out the Wu Chun sword in his hand. A blood-red sword light instantly shot towards one of the immortal venerables. After igniting his bloodline power, the power of Xiao Qian's sword was much stronger than usual. In the face of Xiao Qian's sword, the immortal venerable didn't dare to be careless. Immediately, he used all his strength to deal with Xiao Qian's attack. The power of a single sword strike was already so powerful. At this moment, Xiao Qian was indeed qualified to fight against a great perfection immortal venerable. Unfortunately, this qualification was under the premise of a one-on-one battle. At this moment, Xiao Qian was facing 6 great perfection immortal venerables. He slashed out his sword at one of them. At the same time, the other 5 didn't stop. They had already besieged Xiao Qian. Seeing the 5 of them attacking, the 3 elders on the deck shouted in unison, "Keep him alive. Capture him alive. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1841. In their opinion, Xiao Qian was already a turtle in a jar. Therefore, capturing him alive was naturally more valuable than killing him. Moreover, it wasn't impossible to capture Xiao Qian alive with 6 perfect immortal venerables attacking at the same time. The 6 immortal venerables understood what was going on after hearing the 3 elders' words. Except for the immortal venerable who was attacked by Xiao Qian, the other 5 launched their attacks at Xiao Qian at the same time. However, they didn't use their full strength. After all, the 3 elders had said that they wanted to capture him alive. Facing the attacks of the 5, the battle intent in Xiao Qian's eyes intensified. Countless sharp sword qi condensed around him, forming countless blood-red sword rays that attacked the 5 elders at the same time. Countless sword rays erupted at the same time. Unfortunately, Xiao Qian was facing 5 perfect immortal venerables. These blood-red sword rays couldn't withstand the attacks of the 5 elders and were quickly dispersed. Then, Xiao Qian was also hit by the attacks of the 5 elders. Although the sword rays had helped Xiao Qian neutralize a lot of the attacks, Xiao Qian still spurted out a mouthful of blood after being hit by the attacks of the 5 immortal venerables at the same time. Apparently, he was seriously injured. In just one exchange, Xiao Qian was completely at a disadvantage. Upon seeing this, the 3 elders on the deck sneered coldly. Those with great talent are indeed heaven's prides. However, talent is just talent after all, not combat strength. Before talent is transformed into combat strength, it still doesn't count. Xiao Qian, the outcome has already been decided. Surrender now. The three elders weren't worried at all. There was no way Xiao Chun could survive today. The outcome had already been decided. Xiao Chun didn't respond to their words. Although he was seriously injured, Xiao Chun didn't have the slightest intention of stopping. He forcefully suppressed the surging qi and blood in his body. Then, with Xiao Chun as the center, Wu Chun's swords appeared one after another in the surroundings. The sword realm was already Xiao Chen's strongest move. At the same time, it was also Xiao Chen's strongest state. The three elders and the six immortal reverends were taken aback when they saw the dustless swords appearing one after another. Then, they asked with a puzzled look on their faces, "Is this the sword realm?" "No, this isn't the power of a domain. It's not the sword realm." The three elders didn't know much about the sword realm. When Xiao Chun first displayed the sword realm, the realm lords had to observe it for a long time before they could recognize it. However, their eyesight and knowledge weren't as good as Luo Li and the other realm lords. Therefore, under the cover of Xiao Chen's sword realm, the three of them couldn't see that it was the sword realm. Or it could be said that they had never come into contact with the power of the sword realm. The means that Xiao Chen displayed was somewhat beyond their understanding. However, at the same time, no one noticed that in the starry sky not far away from them, a white-haired old man with a ruddy complexion was watching everything with great interest. It was very strange. This old man was really strange because he wasn't hiding in the void at this moment. He was just standing there casually, but no one noticed his existence. It was as though a person was standing in front of you, but you couldn't see him at all. No one noticed the old man's existence at all. At the same time, the old man looked at Xiao Chun, who displayed the sword realm, with a faint smile and said, "Sword body, sword realm. Interesting, interesting." The old man seemed to be very interested in Xiao Chun. However, very soon, the old man shook his head and smiled when he saw Xiao Chun display the sword realm. This little guy still doesn't know how to use the sword realm and the power of the sword body. However, it's not his fault. I guess no one in this world knows about the sword body. Xiao Chun didn't know about the old man's existence, nor did he know the old man's evaluation of him. To be honest, perhaps Xiao Chun really didn't know how to display and use the sword body and sword realm because no one taught him. All along, Xiao Chun had been comprehending them by himself. Even Luo Li couldn't teach him anything about the sword body and sword realm because Luo Li had only read about the sword body in an ancient book, and it was only a brief introduction. If he comprehended it by himself, he would inevitably take a detour. However, there was no other way. Xiao Chun could only do this. After displaying the sword realm, Xiao Chun didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced and immediately engaged in a fierce battle with the six immortal venerables. Both of his hands were holding the Wu Chun sword tightly. Every slash was equivalent to a strike of the 9 nether sword art. Its power was extremely terrifying. Xiao Chun didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. On the other hand, the 6 immortal venerables were somewhat puzzled and even surprised because they had never come into contact with the sword realm. However, as the 3 elders behind them reprimanded them, the 6 of them quickly calmed down. Don't worry about what means this kid has used. After all, his cultivation base is only at the immortal realm. What's there to be afraid of if the 6 of you join forces? The 3 elders shouted angrily. The 6 of them were stunned when they heard the elders' words. After giving it a thought, they realized that the elders' words made sense. The 6 of them were at the perfect immortal venerable realm. No matter what means Xiao Chen used, there was no reason for them to be afraid. Immediately, the 6 of them no longer hesitated and attacked Xiao Chen together. For a moment, the 7 of them engaged in a fierce battle. They thought that it wouldn't be too difficult to capture Xiao Chen with 6 immortal venerables in the great perfection immortal venerables. However, Xiao Chen still hadn't been defeated even after half an hour had passed. He was still exchanging blows with the 6 of them. As time went by, the 3 elders of the 3rd Desolate couldn't sit still any longer. This didn't make sense. It had been half an hour, but they still hadn't captured Xiao Chen. How could this be possible? Moreover, After half an hour of fierce battle, the injuries on Xiao Chen's body were extremely serious. Logically speaking, Xiao Chen should have lost the ability to fight. However, why was Xiao Chen still able to fight? Moreover, his combat strength didn't decrease at all. That's right. Xiao Chen's injuries were getting more and more serious as time went by, but his combat strength didn't decrease at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be increasing. Xiao Chen's combat prowess had increased instead of decreased. This was absolutely illogical. The three elders were puzzled. However, the mysterious old man who had been watching the battle from the side stared at Xiao Chen thoughtfully. He watched Xiao Chen continuously slash out attacks. After a while, the old man sighed and said, "He's already lost consciousness? This little guy is really stubborn. He has already lost consciousness after suffering such serious injuries, but his body is still fighting instinctively. Please add this to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommend this item." Chapter 1842. Facing six great perfection and mortal venerables at the same time, Xiao Chen's injuries had indeed reached their limits. He had even lost his consciousness, but his body was still fighting according to its instincts. It made sense. Xiao Chen's fighting style was very strange. He was like a puppet without the slightest intelligence. Facing the attacks of six immortal venerables at the same time, he had no intention of dodging at all. Every time, he would meet the attacks head-on, exchanging injuries for injuries. The old man could tell at a glance that Xiao Chen had lost his consciousness and was fighting purely based on his body's instincts. Of course, he was no match for this mysterious old man. However, the three elders of the third desolate land had also noticed something, especially the strange way Xiao Chen was fighting. The three of them fixed their eyes on Xiao Chen. After a while, one of them said in disbelief, "He has fainted." Finally, the elder found a clue and confirmed that Xiao Chen had fallen into a coma. Upon hearing this, the other two elders beside him were in disbelief. "Are you kidding me? He has fainted? He can still fight?" However, they couldn't help but believe it. After careful observation, they confirmed that Xiao Chen had really fallen into a coma. There was no color in his eyes. It was the first time that the three elders had seen a severely injured and unconscious person who could still fight. At the same time, the six great perfection immortal venerables who were fighting Xiao Chen were complaining. They thought that with the six of them attacking together, Xiao Chen would be easily defeated even though he was the heir of the seventh realm. However, after fighting for almost 2 hours, Xiao Chen didn't show any sign of weakening. On the contrary, they could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's attack power was getting stronger. There's something strange about this kid. His attack power is increasing instead of decreasing. One of the great perfection immortal venerables couldn't help but say, his injuries were getting worse and worse, but his attack power was getting stronger and stronger. What was going on? Another great perfection immortal venerable stammered in shock. This kid is still burning the power of his bloodline. After fighting for so long, Xiao Chen's combat strength had increased instead of decreasing. The reason was that Xiao Chen was still burning the power of his bloodline, and it was even more exaggerated than before. He had fainted, but the power of his bloodline was still burning. This was completely because of Xiao Chen's obsession. Because of this obsession, his body instinctively followed Xiao Chen's thoughts before he fainted. From the beginning, Xiao Chen had never thought of leaving this place alive because Xiao Chen knew that even if he burned the power of his bloodline, he still wouldn't be a match for the experts of the third desolate land. So what if he could defeat the six great perfection immortal venerables? There were still 3 immortal emperor elders behind them. Moreover, the other 4 great perfection immortal venerables who went after Guanhong and the others would probably return soon. Therefore, it was almost impossible for Xiao Chen to survive this battle. Xiao Chen had long known that he would die in this battle. Therefore, he had never thought that he could survive this battle. Moreover, to be honest, Xiao Chen really didn't want to run away anymore. In order to survive, he had to abandon the people around him. Xiao Chen really didn't want to experience such a feeling again. Rather than that, he might as well fight to the death. Back then, his parents, Shui Ro, and the other two girls were killed one after another. It was only because of Luo Li's timely rescue that Xiao Chan managed to escape. But what happened after that? Did Xiao Chan feel like he had just survived a disaster? No, not at all. There was only deep sorrow and silence. If Xiao Chan could choose again, perhaps Xiao Chan wouldn't run away anymore. What was the point of abandoning one's loved ones and escaping alone? He really didn't want to run away anymore. He would rather die than run away again. Ah, silly girl. Even if I don't have the strength to protect you, I should at least die in front of you. Xiao Chun thought to himself, as if he had fallen into endless darkness. He felt like he was falling into a bottomless abyss. The surrounding light was getting dimmer and dimmer. Xiao Chun couldn't control his body anymore. At this moment, he had fallen into an extremely mysterious feeling. Was this what people said, the feeling before death? Xiao Chun didn't know. But until now, Xiao Chun didn't have the slightest regret in his heart. Just like what he muttered to himself earlier, since he didn't have the strength to protect Hong Xiu, he should at least die in front of her. Xiao Chun didn't know the situation of the battle outside and couldn't feel any pain at all. His soul continued to fall into the endless darkness as if there was no end to it. His soul felt like it was about to leave his body. As for his physical body, it was like a trapped beast making its final struggle. Driven entirely by instinct, Xiao Chun let out a low growl at that moment. Then, the power of the bloodline all over his body burst out at that moment, burning without holding back at all. Does this kid want to die? Seeing Xiao Chun burning all the power of his bloodline without reservation, the three elders of the third desolate realm who were on the deck couldn't help but speak with a gloomy expression. With the final burst of power, Xiao Chen's cultivation base broke through the immortal venerable realm. Then, the surrounding sword realm changed. Countless Wu Chan swords turned around and aimed at the 6 immortal venerables who were fighting fiercely with Xiao Chun. Then, the countless Wu Chan swords moved at the same time, shooting towards the 6 immortal venerables. The sudden change caused the expressions of the 6 immortal venerables to change drastically. An extreme aura of death instantly enveloped the 6 of them. At the same time, the eyes of the old man who had been watching the battle flashed with a glint of bewilderment. Sword realm, kill. The elder was somewhat shocked. At the last moment, Xiao Chun actually used the killing form of the sword realm, which surprised even the elder. It had to be known that it was almost impossible to comprehend the sword world's slaughter form without any guidance. At the very least, the old man had never seen anyone who could comprehend the sword world's slaughter form alone in his countless years of life. Of course, there were very few people who possessed the body of a sword to begin with. Even the old man had only seen a handful of people who possessed the body of a sword over the countless years. Those people were either dead or had become existences at the same level as the old man. Among the younger generation, Xiao Chun was the first person the old man had seen who possessed the body of a sword. Begging for collection, autumn monthly ticket, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1843. Countless blood swords flew towards the 6 immortal venerables. At this moment, Xiao Chun could be said to be the strongest he had ever been. Of course, in order to possess such strength, Xiao Chun had paid a huge price. Almost all of his bloodline power had been exhausted. It could be said that he had gone all out in this attack. At the same time, the expression of the 6 immortal venerables changed drastically in the face of Xiao Chen's sword world. Originally, they thought that Xiao Chun was at the end of his rope. Who would have thought that Xiao Chun could still display such a powerful attack in such a situation? Countless blood swords enveloped the 6 of them. Naturally, the 6 of them did not dare to be careless in the face of such an attack. They all tried to defend themselves. Unfortunately, under such an attack, the 6 of them were soon seriously injured. One of them was even killed by Xiao Chun. A perfected, immortal, venerable expert was killed by Xiao Chun, just like that. Upon seeing this scene, the 3 elders of the third wilderness, who had been full of confidence, no longer had the confidence they had before. One of them shouted with a gloomy face, as expected of the heir of Hachibara Senkai. "Let's do it." After he spoke, the elder took the lead to attack. Seeing this, the other two elders beside him also nodded slightly. Soon after, they followed closely behind and directly attacked. The three of them thought that with 6 perfect immortal venerables, it wouldn't be a problem for them to take down Shao Chun. However, judging from the current situation, the three of them are still dreaming. Who would have thought that Shao Chun could display such a powerful attack that severely injured the 6 immortal venerables? One of them was even killed on the spot. They had no choice but to take action. Of course, if the three of them didn't take action, the 6 immortal venerables wouldn't be able to survive. In the end, both sides would suffer great losses and perish together. This was somewhat beyond the expectations of the 3 elders. Therefore, they didn't hesitate to take action. Obviously, the strength of the 3 immortal emperors was much stronger than the 6 immortal venerables. Therefore, even though Shao Chun had unleashed the sword world and the kill technique, he was still mercilessly suppressed by the 3 immortal emperors because of the gap of 2 major realms. After saving the remaining 5 immortal venerables, the sword world was destroyed by the 3 elders. At the same time, Shao Chun was indeed at the end of his rope. The power of his bloodline had almost been exhausted, and his chi was extremely weak. Without the need for the 3 elders to take action, Shao Chun had already spurted a mouthful of blood as though he was on the brink of death. Looking at the dying Shao Chun, the 3 elders' faces turned ugly. One of them even snorted coldly. "Umph. I thought we could still capture him alive." The 3 elders had planned to capture him alive from the beginning. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed in the end. Although Shao Chun was still breathing, the 3 elders naturally couldn't tell that Shao Chun was beyond saving. It could be said that the power of the bloodline in his body was almost completely burnt. Even the wills of the heavens would not be able to do anything about such an injury, let alone the 3 of them. Upon hearing the elders' words, the corners of Shao Chun's mouth curled into a sneer. At the same time, another elder said coldly, "Kill him. Since he can't be saved, it's fine to bring him back dead." They had no choice but to bring Shao Chun's corpse back. After saying that, the elder pointed his finger forward. A golden finger beam instantly shot towards Shao Chun's glabella. It was apparent that he wanted to kill Shao Chun with a single finger. Facing the elder's attack, Shao Chun had given up resisting. It wasn't that Shao Chun didn't want to attack, but he had no strength left. The spiritual energy in his body was almost exhausted, and there wasn't even a trace left. Even if Shao Chun attacked first, he didn't have the ability to do so. Shao Chun chuckled self-deprecatingly as he watched the golden beam heading straight for him. "Am I going to die?" he asked. In the face of death, Shao Chun wasn't too afraid. Perhaps it was because Shao Chun had already guessed the outcome the moment he chose to stay. Of course, he wasn't afraid, but Shao Chun was still reluctant because there were many things that he hadn't had the time to do. However, just as Shao Chun said, there were some things that you had to do even though you knew it was impossible. Even though you knew it was a dead end, you had no choice but to brace yourself and walk forward. Shao Chun thought that he was going to die, but no one expected that just as the golden finger beam was about to reach Shao Chun, an elder with white hair and a youthful face, wearing a coarse gray linen robe, would appear in front of Shao Chun without any warning. With his hands behind his back, the elder didn't seem to make any movements, but when the golden finger beam was about half a meter away from the elder, it strangely shattered by itself. It was as if it was forcibly shattered by some kind of force. The gray-clothed elder was naturally the elder who had been watching the battle from the side. At this moment, he stepped in to save Shao Chun, leaving the 3 elders stunned. Then, they sulked one after another. "Who are you?" Facing the elder, the 3 elders couldn't sense any aura at all, as though the elder didn't exist at all. Facing the trio's questioning, the old man simply smiled and said, "This old man wants this little fella. You guys can leave now." The elder spoke casually as though he was talking about an insignificant matter. Upon hearing his words, the 3 elders knitted their brows slightly. Even though the three of them couldn't sense anything from the elder and couldn't see through his cultivation base, their instincts and intuition kept telling them that this elder was dangerous. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man turned his head to look at Xiao Chun. He still had a smile on his face, but there was a hint of helplessness in his voice. "Little fella, you really don't want to live anymore. Burning your bloodline power like this." With that, the elder gently pressed his palm against Xiao Chen's abdomen to surround the immortal mansion. Then, an indescribable and mysterious force slowly flowed into Xiao Chen's body. Xiao Chen had never felt this force before, but as the force flowed into his body, Xiao Chen's heart meridians and immortal mansion quickly stabilized. Even though it didn't have any healing effects, it successfully stabilized Xiao Chen's injuries. At least for the time being, Xiao Chen's life wouldn't be in any danger. With the elder's help, Xiao Chen's eyelids became heavier and heavier. In the end, he couldn't help but close them slowly. But when his body reached its limit, the obsession in his heart made Xiao Chen mutter constantly. Save, save, Hongxiu, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1844. Xiao Chun continued to mutter Hongxiu's name, but soon he fell into a coma. After stabilizing Xiao Chen's injuries, the mysterious force in the old man's body gently dragged Xiao Chen's body. Just as the old man was about to leave, the three immortal emperor elders from the third desolation regained their senses and shouted in a deep voice, "Sir, this person is someone we must get. You can't take him away." Previously, the three elders didn't say anything because they were absent-minded and fearful of the old man. But now that the old man was about to take Xiao Chen away, the three of them naturally wouldn't agree to it. The expression in the old man's eyes did not change at all when he heard the three of them. His expression remained the same. At the same time, the other four elders who had chased after Guanhong's group and the experts from the third wasteland returned. From the looks of it, they had failed to catch up to Guanhong's group. The moment the four elders returned, they saw Xiao Chun and the old man. Upon seeing this, the three elders' confidence was boosted. They immediately surrounded the old man and Xiao Chun. They briefly explained the situation to each other through telepathy. They heard that Xiao Chun was actually here, but at this moment, the old man wanted to take Xiao Chun away. For a moment, the four elders who came later naturally could not agree to it. "Old thing, I don't care who you are. Let go of this kid, and I will let you leave." One of the elders shouted coldly at the old man. Although they couldn't catch up with Guanhong's group, they had encountered Xiao Chun here. There was no doubt that they wouldn't let Xiao Chun escape. They immediately surrounded the old man, not giving him any chance to escape, especially the seven immortal emperor elders. Each of them looked at the old man as though they were facing a formidable enemy. Although they couldn't sense the old man's cultivation base and qi, they had seven immortal emperor elders. If they joined forces, they should be able to contend against the will of the Heavenly Way and Sector Lords. Therefore, the seven of them were determined not to let the old man leave. The old man's expression didn't change at all, even though he was surrounded. His eyes swept across them one by one as though he was looking at a group of ants. It was as though the heavens and earth were looking down on them. Facing the old man's gaze, everyone, including the seven elders, felt as though their hearts had been struck by something. Get lost. Without any unnecessary nonsense, the old man let out a soft cry. Immediately, a terrifying force spread out in all directions with the old man as the center. This wasn't spiritual qi, but its power was extremely terrifying. At the same time, along with the appearance of this violent force, the seven elders and the group of immortal venerables who were surrounding the old man were sent flying away in an instant. Moreover, each of them spurted out a mouthful of blood. With just a shout, the seven immortal emperor elders and more than 20 immortal venerables were severely injured in an instant. None of them had ever encountered such a force before. Under the impact of this terrifying force, the 20 immortal venerables were severely injured and fainted. Although the 7 immortal Emperor Elders still retained their consciousness, they obviously didn't have any combat strength left. Their eyes were filled with fear. The 7 of them looked at the old man in horror. From the beginning to the end, the old man didn't make a move. All of them had completely lost their combat strength with just a shout. They were incomparably shocked. They were afraid that even the will of the heavenly way didn't possess such power. Who exactly was this old man? They were full of questions, but unfortunately, no one could give them an answer. After dealing with these people with a single shout, the old man was about to leave, but he heard Xiao Chun still mumbling about saving someone and Hong Xiu. Although he didn't know who Hong Xiu was, the old man had already sensed the presence of the force of living beings. He guessed that there should be someone in the force of living beings. A smile appeared on his face as he chuckled. "Little guy, you're still thinking about saving people even in such a situation. If it wasn't for this old man, you would be dead by now." Even in such a situation, Xiao Chan was still thinking about saving people. With a chuckle, the old man shifted his gaze to the place where the light gate was previously. When Hong Xiu entered the force of living beings, the light gate had already disappeared. However, this wasn't a big deal for the old man. He gently stretched out his hand and clenched it. Immediately, the space where the force of living beings was located was distorted. Then, the old man forcibly extracted the force of living beings from the space. He easily took away the force of living beings. Of course, Hong Xiu was also taken away along with it. Holding the force of living beings, which was like a river of stars, the old man ignored the 7 elders from the third wilderness. He took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. Of course, Xiao Chun and Hong Xiu left with him. Seeing the old man leave, the 7 elders from the third wilderness naturally didn't dare to stop him. From the power of the old man's shout, it wasn't difficult to see that if the old man wanted to kill them, he could do so with a flick of his finger. From the beginning to the end, the old man didn't even look at the 7 elders, nor did he have any interest in killing them. If the 7 of them hadn't tried to stop the old man probably wouldn't have taken action. "Who is this person?" one of the elders said with some difficulty, with one hand on the warrior's chest. After being hit by the energy just now, this elder couldn't help but feel his blood and qi churning inside his body. As he spoke, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Hearing this, the other elder beside him still shook his head in shock. "I don't know, but this person seems to be even stronger than the will of the heavenly way. Is that possible? Is there an existence stronger than the heavenly way in the 8 Desolates world? Even the few sector lords from the Hachibura Sankai are only on par with the heavenly way. We must report this to the higher-ups. This person is too dangerous. We don't know his identity. If he takes action, I'm afraid no one in the 8 Desolates world can stop him." The 7 elders were shocked by the old man's strength. At the same time, they were curious about the old man's identity. Disregarding their own injuries, the 7 elders quickly brought the unconscious immortal reverends back to the spaceship. Then, they immediately sent the news back to the 7th wilderness, informing everyone of the heavenly way, especially the appearance of the old man. They couldn't afford to be careless. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1845. The sudden appearance of the old man had forcefully rescued Xiao Chun and Hong Xiu. That simple shout of his had frightened all the experts in the third desolate land. Without a doubt, if the old man really wanted to kill them, none of them, including the 7 immortal Emperor Elders, would be able to escape from him. After bringing the immortal venerables back to the spaceship and passing the news to the will of the heavenly way, the 7 elders sat together in a circle after taking some healing pills. Although the old man had left, their faces were still filled with fear. "Who is this old man?" one of the elders murmured. The strength of the old man had shocked the 7 of them. In their opinion, even the sector lords of the will of the heavenly way or the Hachibura Sankai didn't have such strength. With just a shout, the 7 of them couldn't withstand it. They didn't even have the strength to fight back. This was simply unheard of. Another elder paused for a moment before replying in a deep voice. I hope this person has nothing to do with the Hachibara Senkai. Otherwise, we'll be in danger. Now isn't the time to talk about this. Let's leave this place as soon as possible, said another elder. Xiao Chun, Hong Xiao, and even the force of living beings have been taken away by the old man. There was no point in staying here any longer. Moreover, Guanhong and the others had successfully escaped. It wouldn't be long before the experts of the Hachibara Senkai arrived. They didn't stay here for too long. Soon, the 7 elders left with a group of severely injured experts. At the same time, Xiao Chun, who was rescued by the old man, and Hong Xiao, who was still trapped in the force of living beings, were brought to an unknown small continent by the old man. This small continent seemed to be in the Second Desolate Land. It should be the remains of the Second Desolate Land after the collapse of the Second Desolate Land. It wasn't big, and there wasn't a single blade of grass growing on it. At this moment, the old man slowly descended with Xiao Chun and Hong Xiao on this small continent. Then, the old man slowly stretched out his hand and clenched it slightly. The entire continent, including the 3 of them, disappeared into the void at the same time. Bringing the entire continent into the void seemed to be an easy task for the old man. He didn't feel any pressure at all. The continent disappeared directly. Then, in the void, the continent seemed to be imprisoned. It didn't drift around with the violent wind in the void. Instead, it was fixed in place quietly. At the same time, on the continent, the old man took out an ancient wooden house from his storage ring. It looked ordinary, but the appearance of the wooden house instantly filled the continent with spiritual chi. Obviously, this simple wooden house was a precious treasure. Unfortunately, no one else saw what the old man had done. The old man casually threw the force of living beings outside the wooden house. He didn't even glance at it. Perhaps in the old man's eyes, the force of living beings was nothing. Hong Xiao was still refining the power of all living beings, and the old man did not pay any attention to her. He came into the wooden house and casually placed Xiao Chun on the bed. Then, he glanced at Xiao Chun indifferently and murmured softly, "Don't worry. The power of his bloodline has basically been burned up. Even if he's saved, he'll probably be a cripple. Kid, it's up to your luck now. If he takes a fancy to you, it'll probably be your heaven-defying opportunity. If you don't succeed, you'll be destined to be a cripple for the rest of your life." The old man said something baffling. With that, he took out a 7-colored stone from his storage ring. The stone was very beautiful. Moreover, with its appearance, the entire room flickered with a gentle 7-colored light. It could be said with certainty that the 7-colored stone was definitely not an ordinary object. Moreover, such a 7-colored stone did not exist in the 8 Desolates world. No one knew where the old man got this 7-colored stone from. Holding the 7-colored stone in his hand, the old man pondered for a moment. Then he directly crushed it. Then, a strand of soul remnant slowly took shape under the 7-colored light. It was only a strand of soul remnant. It wasn't complete, or it could be said that it was on the verge of collapse. It was very illusory. One could vaguely see the appearance of the soul remnant. It was an elegant middle-aged man. Just by looking at his appearance, he gave off an amiable feeling. After the soul remnant appeared, it was silent for about 10 minutes. Then, the soul remnant said indifferently, "Brother Wuya, did you call me out because you found it?" The soul remnant addressed the old man as Brother Wuya. This should be the old man's name. Hearing this, the old man smiled. He looked at Xiao Chun, who was lying on the bed, and said indifferently, "Take a look for yourself." Without saying much, the soul remnant's gaze fell on Xiao Chun. Then, it slowly flew to Xiao Chun's side and carefully sized up the unconscious Xiao Chun. After scrutinizing Xiao Chun from head to toe, the soul remnant exclaimed in surprise, This kid's bloodline power is almost exhausted. He's a cripple now. However, he has a sore body. How rare, how rare." With a glance, the soul remnant saw that Xiao Chun had a sore body. Regarding the sore body, the soul remnant was very concerned. It couldn't be helped. There were just too few people who had a sword body. Not to mention in the Eight Desolates world. Even in the world where the old man and the soul remnant were from, it was difficult to meet someone who had a sword body. Moreover, Xiaochen was still so young and had a lot of potential. After hearing the soul remnant's words, the old man smiled and said, "Without you, perhaps he's destined to be a cripple. However, if you're willing, this kid can definitely rise from the ashes and be reborn. Now it's up to you to decide." The old man's words were correct. Perhaps no one in the Eight Desolates world would recognize this soul remnant. However, in another world, he had an extremely resounding name, Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. He was the #1 sword sovereign in the Great Thousand World. Every sword cultivator worshipped him. The name Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was definitely worshipped by countless people in the Great Thousand World. However, compared to the old man, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was still slightly inferior. However, everyone knew that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign and the old man were friends. It was a pity that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had disappeared a long time ago. There were many rumors about this in the Great Thousand World. However, no one would have thought that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had fallen a long time ago. Only a soul remnant was left in this world. If it weren't for the old man's help, this soul remnant would have dissipated long ago. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1846. The death of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was still a secret in the Great Thousand World. Only the old man knew about it. Back then, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had gone into seclusion to create his own heaven-breaking sword technique. Unfortunately, he had failed in the end, causing his meridians to flow in reverse. In the end, he had died. However, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign did not regret this outcome at all. He had always been a sword fanatic. Ever since he was young, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had only cared about the way of the sword. As a result, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign did not have any children or disciples, even after so many years. Even though the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerable had established the Sword Gate in the Great Thousand World and was considered one of the top 10 forces in the Great Thousand World, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerable had only cared about the way of the sword. After countless years, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had created his own heaven-breaking sword technique. However, he had never succeeded in comprehending the final move. In fact, he had even gambled his life in order to comprehend the final move. However, he had still failed in the end. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had lived his entire life for the way of the sword. However, it was undeniable that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had met a genius. Before his death, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had sought out the old man. His only wish was that the old man would be able to find a suitable successor for him. He did not want his abilities to be buried with him. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had always been good friends with him. Naturally, the old man agreed to the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's request. However, the old man had used a supreme treasure, the seven-colored stone, and his own heaven-defying methods to successfully protect the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's last shred of soul. The old man had always been searching for a suitable successor for the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. Unfortunately, even though the geniuses of the Great Thousand World were all extremely talented, none of them had caught the old man's eye. The reason was very simple. They did not possess a sword body. The old man did not rush the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. He only waited quietly by the side. After a while, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign nodded. Although I don't think this kid's foundation is good, burning his bloodline has given him a chance. It can be said that he has broken before he rebuilds. Foundation is bad? This was the first time someone had ever said that Xiaoqin's foundation wasn't good enough. One had to know that ever since Xiaoqin had stepped onto the martial path, he had always placed his foundation first. Even so, in the eyes of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign, Xiaoqin's foundation was still not good enough. Xiaoqin couldn't hear the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's words. However, the old man didn't refute him. He smiled and said, "Perhaps this is fate. If this kid hadn't been forced into a corner and forced to ignite his bloodline, you probably wouldn't have taken a fancy to him." Just as the heaven-breaking sword Venerate had said, Shao Qin's burning of his bloodline power could be said to have broken and rebuilt. Of course, this was under the premise that the heaven-breaking sword Venerate had taken a liking to him. Otherwise, there was no need to talk about rebuilding. Shao Qin would probably become a cripple from now on. Nodding slightly, Sword Sovereign Heaven-Breaking agreed with the elder's words. He smiled and said, "Brother Wuya, let's begin." "You decided?" asked the elder indifferently when he heard that. "I've decided. This kid isn't bad. He's an unpolished gem. It's already very difficult for him to achieve so much in this barren land," said the heaven-breaking sword sovereign with a nod. The elder nodded slightly as well. Then he raised his hand, and Shao Qin's body was lifted into the air by a mysterious force. He slowly flew over to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's soul fragment. And Quan was unconscious, so he didn't know where he was. At the same time, the elder said indifferently, "I'll protect you. Let's begin." The heaven-breaking sword sovereign nodded seriously when he heard the elder's words. Then he pressed his hands together with Shao Qin's. Strands of pure bloodline energy were continuously transferred to Shao Qin by the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. As the bloodline energy merged with Shao Qin's body, Shao Qin's injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, this healing was only physical. If Shao Qin wanted to awaken, he would have to completely refine the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy. This was a very long process. After all, this was the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy. It was the most powerful bloodline energy in the Great Thousand World. However, this wasn't something that Shao Qin could control. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign continued to fuse his bloodline energy into Shao Qin's body. Shao Qin didn't have to do anything during this process. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy would automatically fuse with Shao Qin. However, this would take some time. Waves of white light constantly radiated from the elder's body. This white light was very gentle. It enveloped Shao Qin and the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, helping them to successfully convert their bloodline energy. Shao Qin's bloodline energy had been completely burned away, so the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had seen his bloodline energy being converted to Shao Qin. This was also why the elder had said that this might be a chance for Shao Qin to rise from the ashes. This was also why the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had said that he would rise from the ashes. If Shao Qin's bloodline energy hadn't been completely burned away, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign wouldn't have been able to convert his bloodline energy into Shao Qin's. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that possessing the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy was a qualitative leap for Shao Qin. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. After all, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign was someone who stood at the apex of the Great Thousand World. Compared to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, the will of the heavenly way and the various world lords in the Eight Desolates world were all trash. They were like ants. The pure bloodline energy continued to fuse with Shao Qin's body. At the same time, tremendous changes occurred within Shao Qin's body. His damaged meridians rapidly healed and continued to evolve. Completely converting his bloodline energy to Shao Qin wasn't an easy task. It could even be said that the conversion of bloodline energy was something unheard of in the Eight Desolates world. Even the various world lords and the will of the heavenly way probably couldn't accomplish this. While Shao Qin was receiving the bloodline energy from the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, the first Desolates and the seventh Desolates both received news about the second Desolates. In the seventh Desolates, the various members of the will of the heavenly way gathered together. The seventh will of the heavenly way's face was gloomy as he said, "The second Desolates really does have the living being's force. Furthermore, it has already been obtained by the Eight Desolates world." The seventh will of the heavenly way's mood was extremely bad. The reason for this was that Shao Qin had once again escaped death. According to the news from the seven elders of the third Desolates, Xiao Chun should have been dead for sure. However, at the very last moment, a mysterious elder had saved Xiao Chun. This made the seventh will of the heavenly way burn with rage. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. I feel like something is wrong. According to these guys, the third wilderness seemed to have known where they were from the beginning. It is indeed a little strange. Hong Lian nodded in agreement when she heard that. The third wilderness didn't seem to have run into Xiao Chun and the others by accident. Instead, they had come directly to them and were fully prepared. But how did they know where Xiao Chun and the others were? This made people's imaginations run wild. Do you think it could be? Hong Lian pondered for a moment and looked at Luo Li. However, before Hong Lian could finish her sentence, Luo Li interrupted her. Let's not talk about this for now. We'll talk about it when we get there. Hong Lian clearly had a suspect in mind. As for who it was needless to say. There was only one person who could know where Xiao Chun and the others were and had sufficient motive. Mu Fan. Mu Fan received the power of living beings because of Hong Xiao. According to Guan Hong and the others, he was the first to leave and no one saw him after that. Mu Fan had the time and motive to betray Xiao Chun and the others. However, Luo Li didn't allow Hong Lian to say it out loud. Firstly, there was no evidence. Secondly, Mu Fan was the heir of the Hachibara Sankai. After all, it wouldn't be a good thing if word got out that Mu Fan was colluding with the 8 Barren Lands, especially with his identity. Hong Lian was aware of Luo Li's concerns, but she was still unhappy about it. She thought about it and didn't continue speaking. The group sped toward the second wilderness. However, as the first wilderness was far from the second wilderness, unlike the seventh wilderness, which was right next to the second wilderness, the will of the heavenly way from the 8 Barren Lands had already left before Luo Li and the others arrived at the location where Xiao Chun and the others were. The two sides didn't meet. After a round of investigation, Luo Li and Hong Lian realized that there wasn't even a shadow of the power of living beings. In other words, the power of living beings had been taken away by someone. Luo Li and Hong Lian didn't know about the old man's existence. After all, when the old man appeared, Guan Hong and the others had already left. They didn't know who took away the power of living beings. The first suspect was naturally the will of the heavenly way from the 8 Barren Lands. This was because in the 8 Barren Lands, apart from the realm lords, only the will of the heavenly way had the ability to transfer the power of living beings. Luo Li and Hong Lian weren't in a good mood because they couldn't find Xiao Chun or Hong Xiao. Of course, the saddest ones were Long Qing and Xin Yuanling. For half a month, they had searched everywhere, but there was no trace of Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Little brother, standing on the deck of the spaceship, Long Qing murmured softly with reddened eyes. Chapter 1850. Xiao Qin struggled to accept the changes that had occurred to him. In particular, the power of his powerful bloodline made Xiao Chun feel like he was dreaming. It was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Chun was certain that the power of his bloodline was at least 10 times more powerful than before just from his first instinct alone. With such a powerful bloodline, it was no weaker than Long Qing's dragon bloodline. Xiao Chun and Xin Yuanling were both humans, while Long Qing was a dragon. Ignoring everything else, Long Qing's bloodline was definitely the most powerful out of the 3 siblings. After all, almost all of Long Qing's powerful combat strength came from the power of her bloodline. Unlike Xiao Chun and Xin Yuanling, who also had martial arts techniques and immortal skills, Long Qing's powerful combat strength was different. Bloodline power had always been the weakness of the human race. However, a human actually possessed a bloodline power that was not weaker than that of the dragon race. How terrifying was that? However, Shao Chun had yet to truly master the power of the bloodline of the heaven-breaking Sword Lord. If Shao Chun were to be told that everything he sensed was only the tip of the iceberg, what would Shao Chun think of it? That made sense. How could a little dragon like Long Qing compare to the bloodline of an expert like the heaven-breaking Sword Venerate? This was also because Shao Chun's cultivation was too low. Moreover, in order to ensure that Shao Chun could fuse with his bloodline as quickly as possible, the heaven-breaking Sword Venerate had hidden most of his power when he was converting. In other words, he had made it fall into a deep slumber. All he had to do was wait for Shao Chun to slowly comprehend and grasp it in the future. To put it simply, Shao Chun had only begun to fuse with the bloodline of the heaven-breaking Sword Venerate. If he wanted to truly unleash the power of the bloodline, Shao Chun would have to put in a lot of effort and fumble around. Shao Chun's mind was in a mess. Only after Hong Xiu called out to him 3 times did he slowly return to his senses. "Shao Chun, what's wrong?" Hong Xiu asked worriedly. Shao Chun did not know what to say when he heard that. He could only shake his head. Hong Xiu asked curiously, "Shao Chun, what happened when I was in seclusion?" Shao Chun was very curious about what had happened when he was in seclusion. He did not intend to hide anything from Hong Xiu and immediately told her everything. After hearing Shao Chun's description, Hong Xiu did not expect that Shao Chun would be surrounded by a group of experts from the Third Desolate Land while she was in seclusion. In order to protect her, Shao Chun chose to stay behind by himself. Although Shao Chun's description was very calm, Hong Xiu could feel how dangerous the situation was.